Everyone gather around for the family photo, Patricia called out, her voice carrying across the lakeside lawn. I stepped forward with the others, smoothing my sundress. "Not you, Olivia," my mother-in-law said quietly, her smile never wavering. "We need Morgan family only for this one." As I stepped back, watching my husband Daniel join his parents without even a glance in my direction, I made my decision. The encrypted flash drive in my purse suddenly felt heavier. After 5 years of marriage, it was time they knew exactly who they'd been excluding. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My husband Daniel and I arrived at his parents' Lake Tahoe estate on a perfect summer afternoon. Sunlight danced across the crystal-clear water as their sprawling vacation home came into view, its large windows reflecting the surrounding pines and mountains. The Morgan family's 40th wedding anniversary celebration had been meticulously planned over 6 months. Patricia Morgan left nothing to chance when it came to family appearances. "Ready?" Daniel squeezed my hand as we pulled into the circular driveway, already lined with luxury vehicles. His touch was reassuring, but I'd noticed lately how it had become performative, a public gesture rather than a private connection. "Always," I replied with a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. I'd spent 5 years trying to belong in the Morgan family circle. 5 years of subtle corrections to my behavior, my accent, my career choices. 5 years of proving myself worthy of the Morgan name, despite my unusual background, as Patricia liked to call my Chinese-American heritage. The front door swung open before we reached it, and there stood Patricia, immaculate in linen pants and a silk blouse, her silver-streaked blonde hair perfectly styled. Behind her, Robert Morgan adjusted his glasses, offering a distracted smile. "Daniel!" Patricia embraced her son, then turned to me with the air kiss that had become our standard greeting. "Olivia, dear, that dress is colorful." I suppressed a sigh. My dress, a tasteful emerald green sheath, was hardly flamboyant, but it wasn't the muted palette Patricia preferred. "The guest rooms are prepared. Daniel, you're in your old room upstairs. Olivia, we thought you might be more comfortable in the pool house. It's quieter there. And separate. Always separate, despite 5 years of marriage." The pool house was beautiful, of course. Everything the Morgans owned was beautiful and expensive. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the lake, a kitchenette gleamed with unused appliances, and the bathroom featured Italian marble I recognized from a renovation project at their Seattle home. Daniel deposited my suitcase and kissed my cheek. "Mom needs help with some anniversary details. I'll catch up with you at dinner?" He was gone before I could reply, swallowed back into his family as easily as he'd always been. I opened my laptop, checking the secure server one last time. Everything was ready if I decided to use it. I wasn't always Olivia Chen Morgan, cybersecurity specialist at a respectable Seattle firm. Before meeting Daniel, I had been one of the most sought-after ethical hackers in the Pacific Northwest. Companies paid premium fees for me to find their security weaknesses before less ethical hackers did. My work had saved corporations millions in potential data breaches. It was how I'd met Daniel in the first place, contracted to test his family's company security systems. That part of my identity had been quietly folded away after our engagement, replaced by a more palatable version that fit the Morgan image. Patricia had connections on several tech boards and had suggested a more suitable position for me. Daniel had agreed it made sense to step away from the hacking stuff, as he called my former career. "The Morgans are about building, not breaking," he'd explained, not understanding that finding weaknesses was how you built stronger systems. I unpacked my clothes, hanging them carefully in the closet. From my toiletry bag, I removed the flash drive, encrypted with everything I'd discovered over the past month. I hadn't been looking for anything specific. Old habits of security testing were hard to break. But what I'd found on the Morgan Tech Solutions servers had stolen my sleep for weeks. The family dinner was precisely what I expected. Perfectly. Catered, impeccably served, and layered with the subtle barbs that had become the soundtrack to my marriage. Daniel tells us you're thinking of teaching a class at the community college, Patricia remarked as the first course was served. How fulfilling that must be for you. Cybersecurity education is critically important, I replied. Most data breaches happen because of human error. Speaking of errors, Emma, Daniel's sister, interjected. Did you hear Rachel Wilson is back in Seattle? She's heading up digital innovation at Westlake Technologies. The table's reaction was immediate but controlled. Robert's eyebrows raised slightly. Patricia's smile tightened. Daniel suddenly became very interested in his soup. Rachel Wilson, Daniel's college girlfriend. The woman the Morgans had expected him to marry before he met me. The perfect match. With the right background, right connections, and right pedigree. How nice for her, I said, maintaining my composure. Westlake has an excellent reputation. Rachel always had remarkable vision, Patricia said, looking directly at Daniel. She was just telling me about their new security protocol when we had lunch last week. Daniel didn't look up from his soup. Mom, I'm sure Olivia doesn't want to hear about Rachel. But Patricia continued as if he hadn't spoken. She asked about you, of course. Said she'd love to catch up while she's in town. This wasn't news to me. What Patricia didn't know was that Rachel and Daniel had been catching up for the past 3 months. The text messages, the late work meetings, the weekend conference that didn't appear on any Morgan Tech calendar, all documented in my encrypted files. After dinner, we gathered on the lakeside lawn, where Patricia had arranged for a professional photographer. The evening light was perfect, golden hour casting a warm glow over the assembled family. Daniel's brother, James, and his wife, Sophia, had arrived during dinner, completing the Morgan circle. Let's start with the whole family, Patricia directed, arranging everyone with the precision of a military commander. I found myself positioned at the edge, easily cropped out if desired. It wasn't subtle, but then, Patricia had grown less careful about hiding her disapproval over the years. 3 group photos later, Patricia called for different combinations. Now the original Morgans, she announced. Robert, myself, Daniel, Emma, and James. I stepped aside, watching as my husband joined his parents and siblings, their matching smiles and similar features creating a portrait of belonging that had no space for me. Now with Sophia, Patricia added, waving to James's wife, who seamlessly joined the group, her blonde hair and fair skin blending perfectly with the Morgan aesthetic. But no call came for me to join, as more combinations were photographed. Siblings, together, Patricia with her children, Robert with his. I remained on the sidelines, my exclusion growing more pointed with each click of the camera. Daniel glanced at me once, a flicker of discomfort crossing his face before he was distracted by his father's hand on his shoulder. Everyone gather around for the family photo, Patricia finally called, her voice carrying across the lawn. Stepped forward with the others, smoothing my sundress. Not you, Olivia, my mother-in-law said quietly, her smile never wavering. We need Morgan family only for this one. As I stepped back, watching my husband join his parents without even a glance in my direction, I made my decision. The encrypted flash drive in my purse suddenly felt heavier. After 5 years of marriage, it was time they knew exactly who they'd been excluding. The moment crystallized everything. The subtle digs, the separate accommodations, the conversations. That stopped when I entered rooms. I wasn't family. I never had been. And in that moment, I realized I never would be. Not because I hadn't tried hard enough, but because they had never intended to let me in. I watched the perfect family portrait being captured, My husband's arm around his mother, his father's hand on his shoulder, his siblings flanking them in a display of unity and privilege. They looked complete without me. I slipped away before the photographer finished, returning to the pool house to retrieve my laptop and the flash drive. My hands were steady as I connected to the estate's Wi-Fi network, a network I had personally secured 2 years earlier as a favor to Robert. They had never changed the administrative passwords. From my position at the pool house desk, I had a clear view of the back lawn, where the Morgans were now enjoying champagne, the photographer packing up his equipment. Daniel hadn't even noticed my absence yet. I inserted the flash drive and entered the long encryption key from memory. The files organized themselves on my screen. Financial records from Morgan Tech Solutions showing systematic tax evasion spanning 15 years. Emails between Robert and board members discussing deliberate security vulnerabilities in their consumer products to facilitate data harvesting. Communications with offshore accounts. And, most recently, the messages between Daniel and Rachel planning their future, a future that very explicitly didn't include me. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. One particular email from Patricia to Daniel, dated just 2 weeks ago, caught in my throat as I reread it. Once this anniversary weekend is behind us, you can finally move forward with the separation. Rachel understands the need for discretion, and the prenup will ensure minimal complications. Your father has spoken with Judge Williams, who assures us the proceedings can be expedited with appropriate privacy. Everything had been decided. My marriage, my exit, all planned without my knowledge or input. This weekend wasn't just an anniversary celebration. It was to be my final appearance as Daniel's wife before being quietly removed from the Morgan family picture. I had 20 minutes before anyone would think to look for me. 20 minutes to decide how to use what I knew. I could expose everything, send the financial records to the SEC, the consumer privacy violations to the media, the offshore accounts to the IRS. I could destroy the Morgan legacy with a few keystrokes. The evidence was irrefutable, meticulously documented with my professional thoroughness. But that wasn't who I wanted to be. Revenge wasn't my goal. Recognition was. Not recognition from them. I no longer wanted or needed that. But recognition of my own worth, my own power. I made 3 precise copies of the most critical files. The first I encrypted and sent to my personal secure server with a time-release protocol. The second I placed on a new flash drive, tucked safely in my purse. The third I prepared for immediate access. Then I changed into the dress I had originally wanted to wear tonight, a stunning red chipao that Patricia had deemed too ethnic for family photos. The silk hugged my body, the high collar and delicate embroidery connecting me to the heritage I had subdued to please the Morgans. I swept my hair up, applied red lipstick, and slipped on the jade earrings my grandmother had given me. When I returned to the lawn, conversations paused. Daniel's eyes widened, whether in appreciation or alarm, I couldn't tell. Patricia's mouth tightened into a thin line. "Olivia," she said, her tone conveying volumes of disapproval. "We're about to have the anniversary toast." "Perfect timing," I replied, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing server. "I have something to add to the celebration." Robert tapped his glass, calling for attention. "Patricia and I want to thank you all for coming to celebrate 40 years of Morgan family unity and success." The small gathering, family members and a few close friends of the elder Morgans, applauded politely. "The Morgan name has always stood for integrity, innovation, and excellence," Robert continued. "Values we've passed to our children and to Morgan Tech Solutions." As he spoke, I connected my phone to the outdoor entertainment system Patricia had been so proud to install last summer, a system I had helped configure. "And now," Robert said, raising his glass higher, "to 40 more years of Morgan prosperity." As glasses clinked, I tapped my screen. The large outdoor display that had been showing a slideshow of Morgan family photos suddenly changed, displaying the first file from my drive, a comprehensive organization chart of Morgan Tech Solutions, offshore tax evasion structure. What the... Robert fumbled with his glass, nearly dropping it. I thought I might contribute to the family history slideshow, I said, my voice calm despite the adrenaline coursing through me, since I wasn't included in the family photos. Daniel rushed toward me, but I stepped aside, tapping my screen again. The display changed to show emails between him and Rachel, dated throughout our marriage. Olivia, stop this immediately, Patricia hissed, her perfect composure cracking. Why would I do that? I'm just getting to know my family better, I replied. For instance, I had no idea Daniel and Rachel had already chosen names for their future children. How thoughtful to plan that while still married to me. Guests were murmuring now, some discreetly stepping away, others watching with undisguised fascination. This is a private family matter, Robert said through clenched teeth. Like the consumer data your company has been illegally harvesting and selling? I asked, changing the display again. Or the product safety reports you've buried? To avoid recalls? James stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. Turn that off right now or I'll... You'll what? I asked mildly. Call security? The authorities? I'm not sure that's in your best interest, considering what else I have. Daniel finally reached me, his face a mask of panic. Olivia, please. Whatever you think you know. I don't think, Daniel. I know. I met his gaze directly. I know about the planned divorce, the conversations with Judge Williams, the agreement with Rachel. I know about the separate room this weekend. My last performance as your wife before being discarded. His face drained of color. How did you... That's the thing about marrying a hacker, then forcing her to become something else, I said. You forgot who I really am. Patricia approached, her voice lowered to avoid the guest's ears. Name, your price, whatever you want, we can discuss it privately. I laughed, the sound genuine and liberating. You still don't understand. I don't want your money. I never did. I addressed the gathering, raising my voice. For those wondering what's happening, allow me to introduce myself properly. I'm Olivia Chen, one of the top cybersecurity specialists in the country before I was persuaded that being a Morgan wife was more important than my career. I tapped my phone once more, displaying my original professional credentials and achievements, awards, recognitions, and innovations the Morgans had never acknowledged. I've spent 5 years trying to be family to people who decided before they met me that I never would be. Not because of any failing on my part, but because of what I represent, a world outside Morgan control. Robert moved toward the house, presumably to cut power to the display, but I called after him. That won't help, Robert. Everything I'm showing here has already been secured elsewhere. But don't worry. Unlike your company, I believe in ethical information management. He froze, then turned back, his expression a mixture of rage and fear. I'm not here to destroy you, I continued. I'm here to free myself. So here are my terms. A clean, fair divorce with no attempts to enforce the prenup I signed under false pretenses. My evidence stays secure unless you attempt to damage my reputation or career. I'll even sign an NDA about Morgan Tech's business practices, provided the company implements actual security fixes for your customers' data within 6 months. You can't just... Patricia began. I can and I am, I interrupted. You planned this weekend as my exit from the Morgan family. I'm simply taking control of my own departure. I turned to Daniel, who stood pale and silent. You could have told me you weren't happy. You could have been honest about Rachel. Instead, you let me believe I was the problem. Too ethnic, too independent, too much myself to be a Morgan. Olivia, he started. It's Ms. Chen now, I corrected him. And I think we've all pretended enough for one evening. I disconnected my phone from the system, the display returning to innocuous family photos that no longer held any power over me. The contrast between the smiling images and the tense, silent gathering was stark. "I've already packed my things," I said. "I'll be staying at the Lakeside Hotel tonight and flying back to Seattle tomorrow. My lawyer will be in touch regarding the divorce terms." As I walked away from the stunned gathering, Sophia, James's wife, unexpectedly fell into step beside me. "That was the most incredible thing I've ever seen," she whispered, her eyes wide. "They've been slowly trying to Morganize me too." I gave her a genuine smile. "When you're ready to talk, call me. Unlike them, I believe in women supporting women." I left her with my card, my new card, with my maiden name and the cybersecurity consultancy I'd been quietly building for the past year. My exit from the Morgan estate was unhindered. No one tried to stop me, though I felt their eyes watching as I drove away in the rental car I'd had the foresight to keep. At the hotel, I called Mia, my best friend who had warned me about the Morgans from the beginning. "It's done," I told her when she answered. "Are you okay?" The concern in her voice made my eyes sting with the first tears of the evening. "I'm better than okay," I replied, surprising myself with how true it felt. "I'm free." 6 months later, my consultancy had expanded to offices in Seattle and Portland. The divorce had proceeded exactly as I'd outlined: clean, fair, and quiet. The prenup was set aside without argument, and I received a settlement that, while less than what I could have demanded with my leverage, was more than enough to support my fresh start. More satisfying than the financial settlement was watching Morgan Tech Solutions quietly implement the security fixes I'd specified. They didn't acknowledge me publicly, of course, but industry insiders knew where the sudden focus on consumer privacy had originated. Daniel and Rachel announced their engagement 3 months after our divorce was finalized. I sent no gift, but I did send a card. "May you both find what you're looking for." Patricia attempted to reach out once, inviting me to coffee with a stiffly worded email about bygones. I declined politely, telling her I was too busy restoring the career her family had persuaded me to set aside. On the 1-year anniversary of that night at Lake Tahoe, I received an unexpected package. Inside was a framed photo, one of the few taken during my marriage that showed me genuinely smiling, standing slightly apart from the Morgan family at some charity function. Attached was a note in Sophia's handwriting. "Thought you might want to reclaim this piece of your history. P.S. I left James last month. Those free consultations you offered literally saved my life. The Morgans aren't speaking to me either. Never felt better." I smiled, placing the photo not on my wall but in a memory box I kept in my closet. A chapter closed but not forgotten. Later that evening, I met with my team to finalize our new government contract, the largest in my company's short history. As I looked around the table at the diverse, brilliant specialists I'd assembled, I realized I'd built something the Morgans never could: a circle based on merit rather than bloodline. That night, in my downtown Seattle apartment with its view of Puget Sound, I raised a glass to my reflection, to the woman who had walked away from a family that wouldn't claim her, only to reclaim herself. The exclusion from those family photos had been the final push I needed to reveal my true identity, not just to the Morgans, but to myself. In losing what I thought I wanted, I had found what I actually needed. Not acceptance from people determined to reject me, but the courage to live authentically as myself. From the pool house at Lake Tahoe to the corner office in Seattle, my journey wasn't about revenge, but reclamation. The Morgans had tried to make me smaller, to reduce me to an accessory in their carefully curated image. Instead, they had inadvertently set me free. 5 years earlier, I stood in my Portland apartment surrounded by computer monitors, running the final checks on Morgan Tech Solutions' security infrastructure. The contract had come through a colleague who knew my reputation for finding vulnerabilities others missed. 3 months of remote testing had culminated in this moment. Preparing my findings for Robert Morgan, CEO of one of Seattle's fastest-growing tech companies. I'd already discovered 17 critical security flaws that could have exposed customer data to skilled attackers. The Morgan family wouldn't be happy with my report, but they'd be much less happy if they'd hired someone with malicious intent instead of me. My phone buzzed with a text from the project coordinator. Change of plans. Robert's son Daniel will review your findings instead. He's heading their new cybersecurity division. I frowned. This often happened when companies didn't want their CEOs directly associated with security failures. Send in someone younger, someone who could absorb the blame if needed. When Daniel Morgan walked into the conference room the next day, I understood why he'd been chosen. Tall with warm brown eyes and an easy confidence, he looked like he'd stepped out of a business magazine's 30 Under 30 feature. His tailored suit probably cost more than my monthly rent. Ms. Chen, he extended his hand with a smile that softened his professional demeanor. I've been looking forward to meeting the person who tore our systems apart. I prefer to think of it as showing you where to build stronger walls, I replied, shaking his hand firmly. For 3 hours, I walked him through my findings, explaining each vulnerability and its potential impact. Unlike many executives who glazed over during technical explanations, Daniel asked insightful questions. He took detailed notes and didn't try to minimize the issues I'd found. This is impressive work, he said as I concluded. Honestly, more thorough than I expected. That's why your company hired me. Actually, he leaned forward slightly. That's not entirely accurate. I hired you. You? I've been following your work for a while. Those vulnerabilities you exposed at FinSecure last year, brilliant methodology. When we needed someone to test our systems, I specifically requested you. I felt a flush of pride mixed with skepticism. Men in tech often claim to admire women's work as an opening line. Well, I'm glad I could help identify your security gaps, I said professionally. My written report includes detailed remediation steps for each issue. Would you consider implementing those steps yourself? Daniel asked. We're building a security team, and someone with your skills would be invaluable. I smiled, but shook my head. I'm not looking for full-time positions. I prefer the variety of consultant work. At least let me buy you dinner, he countered, to discuss a potential consulting arrangement. I hesitated, my usual boundary between professional and personal blurring slightly under his genuine smile. Just dinner, I clarified, to discuss work. Of course, he agreed easily, though I can't promise I won't find your approach to security as interesting as you do. Dinner led to more professional conversations, which gradually evolved into personal ones. Daniel wasn't what I expected from the heir to a tech dynasty. He spoke passionately about ethical technology development, consumer privacy rights, and his vision for Morgan Tech's future. He listened when I talked about growing up in Portland with parents who'd immigrated from China, about putting myself through college, about building my reputation in a field dominated by men. 3 months after our first dinner, we were dating, steadily. 6 months in, he invited me to Seattle to meet his family. They'll love you, he assured me as we drove to his parents' Medina estate overlooking Lake Washington. Just be yourself. The moment we stepped through the Morgans' front door, I knew being myself wasn't going to be enough. Patricia Morgan's cool assessment took in my simple black dress and pearl earrings, with a smile that never reached her eyes. Daniel, darling, she embraced her son, then turned to me. And you must be Olivia. We've heard so much about you. Her tone suggested whatever she'd heard hadn't impressed her. Robert Morgan was more direct, at least. After brief introductions, he steered me toward his study while Patricia took Daniel to catch up on family matters. So, Robert said once we were seated in leather chairs that probably cost more than my car, Daniel tells me you're quite the computer expert. I specialize in cybersecurity, I clarified. Finding and fixing vulnerabilities before they can be exploited. Yes, breaking into systems, he nodded. Quite an unusual field for a young woman. Not breaking in, I corrected gently. Protecting. And there are more women in the field than most people realize. He made a non-committal sound. And your parents? Daniel mentioned they're from overseas? They immigrated from Shanghai in the 1980s. My father teaches physics at Portland State. My mother is a pediatrician. This seemed to improve his assessment slightly, though his next question revealed why. Academics. And your family has been in America how long? I was born here, I replied, understanding the subtext. But my parents maintained strong connections to Chinese culture while raising me. Fascinating, he said in a tone that suggested it was anything but. You know, the Morgans have been in Seattle for 5 generations. Daniel's great-great-grandfather helped build this city. Before I could respond, Patricia appeared at the doorway. Dinner is ready, you two. Robert, you can finish your interrogation at the table. She laughed lightly as if she'd made a joke, but her eyes remained calculating. Dinner was an exercise in polite warfare. Emma, Daniel's sister, asked pointed questions about my hacking, while her husband Grant nodded along with feigned interest. James, Daniel's younger brother, barely acknowledged me, focused instead on telling Daniel about the new yacht their father had purchased. Olivia, Patricia said as dessert was served, Daniel tells us you're self-employed. How enterprising of you. My consultancy has grown significantly over the past few years, I replied. I work with major financial institutions and tech companies to strengthen their security posture. But such unstable income, she continued. And so much travel, I imagine. Difficult to establish roots. Daniel squeezed my hand under the table. Olivia's actually considering some changes, Mom. We've been talking about her taking a more permanent position with Morgan Tech. This was news to me. We'd discussed the possibility theoretically, but I'd made no decisions. Is that so? Patricia's eyebrows raised slightly. How convenient. After dinner, as Daniel gave me a tour of the property, I confronted him about his comment. I never agreed to work for your family's company, I said. Why would you tell them that? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I know, and I'm sorry. It's just, they'd understand that better than what you actually do. Mom's generation sees consultants as people who couldn't get real jobs. But that's not true, and you know it. My work is highly specialized and… I know, he cut in. You're brilliant at what you do, but my family is traditional. They value stability, company loyalty, clear career paths. I was trying to translate your world into terms they'd respect. I wanted to argue further, but held back. This was our first meeting after all. There would be time to clarify misunderstandings, how wrong I was. Over the next year of dating, Daniel, I gradually came to understand that the Morgans operated by a specific set of rules. Their conversations ran on multiple levels: what was said aloud, what was implied, and what was understood without being mentioned at all. Family loyalty trumped individual preferences. Appearances mattered more than realities. And outsiders remained outsiders until they proved their worth. A moving target I could never quite hit. You don't understand how it works in families like ours, Daniel explained after a particularly tense dinner where Patricia had spent the evening highlighting the accomplishments of Rachel Wilson, Daniel's ex-girlfriend from college. Mom's just testing you. Stand your ground and eventually she'll respect you. But standing my ground only seemed to confirm Patricia's assessment that I was difficult. Agreeing with her meant I was lacking conviction. There was no winning strategy. When Daniel proposed on a weekend trip to Vancouver, I hesitated despite loving him deeply. Are you sure? I asked, the ring box open between us. Your family has made it clear I'm not what they expected for you. My family doesn't decide who I love, he insisted. Besides, they'll come around once they see how serious we are. I believed him because I wanted to believe him. Because the way he looked at me made me feel like I could belong anywhere, even in the Morgan orbit. Because I loved him enough to imagine that love could transform his family's perception of me. The engagement announcement was met with what Patricia called delighted surprise from the Morgan side, a phrase that seemed to emphasize both words equally. Plans for the wedding immediately became a battleground. A small ceremony would be lovely, Patricia suggested at our first planning lunch. Just family and close friends at the Morgan estate. Actually, I countered, we were thinking of the botanical gardens. My parents have always loved it there, and it could accommodate our combined guest list. Patricia's smile tightened. The Morgans have married at home for generations, dear. Traditions matter in old families. Daniel, sitting beside me, squeezed my hand but said nothing. In the end, we compromised on the Seattle Art Museum, neutral territory that satisfied neither family completely. I won battles over the menu, incorporating both Western and Chinese elements, and lost others over the guest list, expanded to include business associates I'd never met. Throughout the planning, I watched Daniel perform a careful balancing act between my wishes and his parents' expectations. He never directly contradicted his mother in her presence, saving his support for me for private moments afterward. Just get through the wedding, he assured me. Once we're married, we'll do things our way. The wedding itself was a beautiful facade over tension. My parents, proud but uncomfortable amid the wealth on display, stayed close to their side of the family. The Morgans moved through the reception like royalty greeting subjects, occasionally stopping at my side to be photographed with their new daughter-in-law. Emma cornered me in the bathroom, wine glass in hand. You know, we all thought he'd end up with Rachel. I gathered that, I replied, reapplying my lipstick with steady hands. Nothing personal, she continued. It's just, she's known our world forever. Her father and ours went to boarding school together. She understands how things work. And I don't? Emma shrugged. You'll learn, or you won't. Either way, Daniel seems committed. Her words were hardly reassuring. After the honeymoon, a carefully curated tour of Europe that mysteriously included stops at cities where Morgan business associates lived, we settled into a home in Seattle's Queen Anne neighborhood. Daniel had owned the house before our marriage, and though he encouraged me to redecorate, Patricia's frequent visits made clear her opinions on any changes I suggested. That artwork is certainly vibrant, she commented when I hung a contemporary Chinese painting in the dining room, though perhaps a bit overwhelming for the space. The painting was relocated to my home office within a week, Daniel suggesting it would showcase better there. My consulting business continued to thrive, but the Morgans viewed it with thinly veiled concern. Surely, now that you're settled down, you'll want something more structured, Robert suggested at a family dinner 3 months after the wedding. Morgan Tech's security department could use someone with your background. I appreciate the offer, I replied, but my business is doing well. I value the independence. Independence is all well and good before children, Patricia interjected, but Morgan women have traditionally focused on family once married. I nearly choked on my wine. Children aren't in our immediate plans. Daniel cleared his throat. What Olivia means is that we're enjoying being newlyweds right now. Again, he'd smoothed over my direct statement with a more palatable version for his parents. Later that night, I confronted him. You need to stop translating me to your family. I can speak for myself. I know you can, he sighed, but you don't always understand how they'll interpret what you say. I'm trying to bridge the gap. Maybe the gap exists because they don't want to understand me, I suggested. Have you considered that? He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd come to recognize as his response to stress. They're set in their ways, but they're trying. You have to meet them halfway. I've been meeting them more than halfway since we met. The pattern continued through our first year of marriage. Daniel and I were happy when alone, but family gatherings became performances where I played the role of the grateful outsider welcomed into the Morgan fold, expected to gradually transform into someone who fit their mold. The first major crack appeared when I was invited to the Morgan Tech Solutions annual retreat. As Daniel's wife, my attendance was expected at the social events surrounding the business meetings. Patricia had coordinated everything, from accommodations at a luxury mountain resort to scheduled activities for executives' spouses. "We have a lovely spa day planned while the men are in meetings," she informed me over brunch a week before the event. "Then shopping in the village." "Actually," I said, "I thought I might sit in on the security planning session." Daniel mentioned, "They're discussing the new consumer data protection protocols." Patricia looked genuinely confused. "But that's a business meeting, dear." "Cybersecurity is my business," I reminded her. She patted my hand. "Of course it was. But priorities change after marriage. The other wives will wonder why you're not joining them." At the retreat, I compromised by attending the spa morning, then slipped into the afternoon security session. I sat quietly at the back, listening as Morgan Tech's new security director, a man with half my qualifications, outlined a plan with several obvious vulnerabilities. When the floor opened for questions, I raised my hand and pointed out the issues professionally. The room fell silent, executives turning to stare at me with expressions ranging from surprise to discomfort. Daniel, seated at the front table, looked stricken. The security director fumbled for responses to my points, growing defensive. Robert Morgan cleared his throat from the head of the table. "Thank you for your input, Olivia. Perhaps you could share any further thoughts with Daniel privately, and he can bring them to the team's attention if appropriate." I was being dismissed, my expertise invalidated because I'd stepped outside my assigned role as a Morgan wife. That evening at dinner, Patricia seated me with the other wives, far from the executives' table where Daniel sat with his father and the board members. The women discussed children's schools, recent renovations, and charity committees, topics that assumed shared experiences I didn't have. Later, in our suite, Daniel was frustrated. "You embarrassed Kevin in that meeting. He's new to the role." "His plan had serious flaws," I pointed out. "I was trying to help." "There are channels for that kind of feedback, Olivia. You can't just speak up in a board-level meeting without warning." "Would those channels have taken my input seriously? Because your father certainly didn't." Daniel sighed. "It's complicated. You're family now, which makes your role different. If you want to contribute professionally, we need to establish the right framework. A framework where I don't publicly display more knowledge than the men you've hired." He didn't answer directly, which was answer enough. After 2 years of marriage, I found myself increasingly isolated. My consulting work had dwindled as I turned down projects requiring travel to accommodate Morgan family events. My friendship circle had narrowed to people the Morgans deemed acceptable. Even my wardrobe had subtly transformed to match Patricia's conservative aesthetic. The most alarming change was in myself. I'd become hesitant to express opinions that might conflict with Morgan sensibilities. I'd learned to pause before speaking, mentally filtering my thoughts through what Daniel called Morgan context. One evening, scrolling through photos from a recent Morgan Tech charity gala, I barely recognized myself in the images. There I stood in a muted blue dress Patricia had helped select, hairstyled in the elegant but conservative way she preferred, smiling the practiced smile I'd developed for Morgan occasions. I looked like a Morgan accessory, not Olivia Chen. That night, I dreamed of my old apartment in Portland, surrounded by computers, the freedom to be brilliantly myself without apology. I woke determined to reclaim parts of my identity that had been gradually erased. I reopened my consulting practice, selectively accepting projects that wouldn't conflict with family obligations but would keep my skills sharp. I redecorated my home office with the artwork and colors I loved. I reconnected with my old friend Mia, whose direct manner and tech background had always unsettled Patricia. Daniel supported these changes superficially, but became uncomfortable when they intersected with his family's expectations. Mom asked, "Why you couldn't make the foundation lunch yesterday?" he mentioned one evening. "I had a client meeting I couldn't reschedule," I replied, not looking up from my laptop. I told her that when she invited me. "She went to a lot of trouble with the seating arrangements. The Prescotts were asking about you. I'm sure they survived my absence," Daniel sighed. "It's not about survival, it's about appearances. When you're not there, people talk." "Let them talk," I said, finally meeting his eyes. "I'm rebuilding the career I put on hold to fit into your family's expectations." "No one asked you to put your career on hold," he countered. "Not directly, no. But every suggestion that consulting wasn't stable enough, every comment about Morgan women focusing on family, every dismissal of my professional input, they all sent the same message." His expression softened. "I never wanted you to feel that way. I'm proud of what you do." "Are you?" "Because sometimes it feels like you're prouder when I'm playing the role of perfect Morgan wife than when I'm being true to myself." The conversation ended without resolution. As most of our deeper discussions did now, we'd become skilled at reaching the edge of real conflict, then retreating to safer ground. The third year of our marriage brought subtle changes in Daniel. Late work meetings became more frequent. Weekend trips to check on satellite offices multiplied. His phone buzzed constantly with messages he'd check with a slight frown before responding quickly. I told myself it was work stress. Morgan Tech was expanding rapidly, and Daniel's responsibilities had grown. But a nagging instinct, the same one that helped me identify security vulnerabilities, told me something else was happening. I ignored that instinct until the night Daniel's phone lit up on our bedside table while he was in the shower. The preview notification showed a message from RWM that made my heart stop. "Miss you already. Last night was perfect. RW. Rachel Wilson." I didn't confront him immediately. The security specialist in me wanted more data before reaching conclusions. Over the next month, I observed patterns. The consistent Thursday late meetings that extended past reasonable business hours. The weekend conference in Portland, where the hotel had no record of a Morgan Tech event. The sudden increase in private browsing sessions on his laptop. I could have hacked his accounts easily. It was literally my professional expertise. But something held me back. Perhaps the last shred of trust, or perhaps the knowledge that once I crossed that line, our marriage would be irrevocably changed. Instead, I created space for honesty. "Daniel," I asked one evening over dinner, "are you happy with how things are between us?" He looked up, startled by the directness of the question. "Of course. Why wouldn't I be?" "We've been distant lately. You're working late more often. We hardly talk about anything meaningful." He reached for my hand across the table. "It's just work pressure. The Seattle-Portland expansion is taking more time than expected." The lie slid smoothly from his lips, his eyes meeting mine without hesitation. This was when I knew. The ease of his deception meant it wasn't the first time. That night, I crossed the line. While Daniel slept, I used his fingerprint to unlock his phone, a basic security vulnerability I'd warned him about years ago. The evidence was all there. Months of messages with Rachel, hotel reservations, dinner receipts, plans for a future. That didn't include me. More shocking were the email exchanges with his parents about how to handle the situation. Patricia had arranged lunch meetings with Rachel throughout my marriage. Robert had discussed the unfortunate investment of our wedding with the family attorney, exploring how to minimize financial impact of a divorce. The Morgans had never accepted me, never intended our marriage to be permanent. I was a phase Daniel needed to outgrow before returning to Rachel, the woman they'd always wanted for him. I replaced the phone exactly as I'd found it and lay awake until morning, a cold clarity settling over me. I wasn't angry, not yet. First came the analytical phase, assessing the situation from all angles as I would a security breach. What were my vulnerabilities? What assets needed protection? What countermeasures were available? Over the next weeks, I created a secure digital vault documenting everything: the affair, the family's involvement, their discussions of divorce strategy. I updated my professional credentials, reconnected with key industry contacts, and quietly began looking for a new place to live. I was preparing for the inevitable confrontation when Patricia called with news that would accelerate my timeline. "We're planning something special for our 40th anniversary," she announced. "A family gathering at our Lake Tahoe estate, the first week of July." "That sounds lovely," I replied, my voice betraying nothing of what I knew. "It's important that everyone attend," she emphasized, "family unity and all that." The irony wasn't lost on me. Family unity from the woman who'd been orchestrating my removal from said family. "Of course," I agreed. Daniel and I wouldn't miss it. That evening, I overheard Daniel on the phone, his voice low. "It's all arranged." "Yes, during the anniversary weekend. Mom thinks it's the perfect timing. Clean break before the fiscal year ends." They were planning to end our marriage at the anniversary celebration. A fitting symmetry. The family event they'd never fully included me in would be the setting for my formal exclusion. As I packed for Lake Tahoe, I made my own preparations. The flash drive with all my evidence was secured. My new apartment lease was signed, though Daniel knew nothing of it. My independent financial accounts were organized, unreachable by Morgan influence. I included one special item in my luggage, a red chipao my grandmother had given me, traditional yet modern, a symbol of the heritage I'd muted to please the Morgans. I hadn't worn it since before my marriage, but it would be perfect for what I now planned. The drive to Lake Tahoe was filled with artificial conversation. Daniel pointed out landmarks, discussed the weather, mentioned which family members would be arriving when, all while avoiding my eyes for too long. I responded with appropriate interest, playing my role in our final performance as a couple. The estate was exactly what I expected: sprawling, luxurious, and positioned to showcase wealth without appearing ostentatious. Old money knew how to whisper, not shout. As we pulled into the circular driveway, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The Morgans had orchestrated every aspect of my entry into their family, and now my exit. But they had forgotten one crucial detail. They'd married a woman who specialized in finding vulnerabilities in carefully constructed systems, and their system was about to face its greatest security test. The Morgan estate at Lake Tahoe gleamed in the summer sun, its windows reflecting the pristine water and surrounding pines. A team of staff members emerged as our car pulled up, efficiently removing luggage and ushering us inside as if we were visiting dignitaries rather than family. The familiarity of this orchestrated welcome only heightened my awareness that I was, and had always been, a guest rather than a member of this dynasty. Patricia greeted Daniel with a warm embrace, her eyes lighting up at the sight of her eldest son. When she turned to me, her smile remained fixed, but the warmth drained away. "Olivia, I hope you had a pleasant drive," she said, air kissing near my cheek. "We've arranged the pool house for you and Daniel. I know how you value your privacy." The implication was clear. Even here, we were being kept separate from the main house, where the real family would stay. The pool house was beautiful, of course, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake and mountains beyond. But its location emphasized our status as adjacent to, not within, the Morgan inner circle. "How thoughtful," I replied, my voice pleasant but non-committal. I had long ago learned that direct confrontation only strengthened Patricia's conviction that I lacked proper breeding. As a staff member led us along a stone path to the pool house, Daniel placed his hand on the small of my back, a gesture that once felt intimate, but now seemed performed, as though he was already practicing how to touch a woman who was no longer his wife, but required public courtesy. "It's actually nice to have some space from the family chaos," he offered, misreading my silence as disappointment. "Mom tends to micromanage everyone in the main house." "I'm sure she does," I said, wondering if he realized how much his mother had already micromanaged the dissolution of our marriage. The pool house interior was immaculate: neutral tones, tasteful artwork, fresh flowers in crystal vases. Nothing personal, nothing that might suggest individual taste or preferences. A Morgan space designed for Morgan-approved occupants. As I unpacked my clothes, hanging them carefully in the cedar closet, Daniel's phone chimed with a message. He glanced at it, then immediately typed a response, his fingers moving quickly across the screen. "Work?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Just Dad checking on some details for tomorrow," he replied without meeting my eyes. Another lie, delivered with practiced ease. I wondered how many he had told over the years, how many I had chosen to believe because the alternative was too painful to consider. "I need to meet with him about the anniversary dinner arrangements," Daniel continued, already moving toward the door. "Shouldn't take long. Why don't you rest after the drive?" He was gone before I could respond, the door clicking shut behind him. I stood in the silent room, listening to his footsteps fade along the stone path. Then I removed my laptop from its case and sat at the small writing desk by the window. The Morgan Family Network password hadn't changed since I'd set it up during a previous visit, a security oversight that would prove useful now. I connected easily, then began exploring the shared drives that the family used for event planning and communications. There it was in Patricia's meticulously organized files. 40th anniversary, final arrangements. I opened the document and found the seating chart for the celebration dinner, scheduled for the following evening at the lakeside restaurant they had rented for the occasion. 12 seats, not 13. I had been removed from the family count, already, though I was still physically present. I scrolled further, finding a detailed timeline for the weekend. The first notation that caught my eye was scheduled for 9:30 p.m. tomorrow evening. D provides update on personal situation. The clinical phrasing disguised what I now understood was to be Daniel's announcement of our impending separation. My exclusion from the family photos was scheduled for 7:45 p.m., just before the dinner. A small note in Patricia's distinctive phrasing indicated family photos only, O not included. My absence would establish the narrative before Daniel's announcement made it explicit. A separate folder contained legal documents, draft separation papers prepared by the Morgan family, attorney, dated 3 months earlier. The proposed settlement offered me a fraction of what I was entitled to under Washington state law, with stipulations about confidentiality regarding Morgan family matters and business practices. Most revealing was an email exchange between Patricia and Daniel from the previous week. Patricia: "Everything is arranged for next weekend. The announcement will be better coming from you, with all of us there to support you. Rachel understands the need for discretion until everything is finalized." Daniel: "I still think we should wait until after the weekend to tell Olivia. Making her sit through the celebration knowing what's coming seems unnecessarily cruel." Patricia: "It's cleaner this way. The family will be together, presenting a unified front. Better to handle it all at once than drag it out with separate conversations. Robert has confirmed with Judge Williams that the proceedings can be expedited once papers are filed." Daniel: "She deserves better than this." Patricia: "She'll be well compensated for her time as a Morgan. The prenup is generous considering the circumstances. Once this chapter is closed, you and Rachel can move forward properly. The family needs stability, Daniel, especially with the company changes coming this fall." I read the exchange twice, my hands steady on the keyboard despite the earthquake happening in my chest. They had planned everything. My humiliation, my removal, my replacement with Rachel. The woman who had always been Patricia's choice. The woman who understood the Morgan way. I closed the files and secured my tracks, leaving no digital footprint of my exploration. Then I opened a secure messaging app and contacted my old colleague Jin, one of the few ethical hackers whose skills exceeded even my own. Need a secure server with untraceable backup, I typed. Personal emergency. Jin's response came within minutes. Server ready. Triple encryption. Send what you need. No questions asked. I began transferring copies of everything I'd found. The emails, the legal documents, the anniversary plans. Not for blackmail, but for protection. The Morgans would never allow themselves to be truly exposed, but knowing that I had evidence would ensure they didn't attempt to destroy my reputation or career in the aftermath. As the files transferred, I moved to the window overlooking the main house. Through the gathering twilight, I could see the Morgan family assembled on the terrace, Robert holding court with a drink in hand, Patricia arranging people into conversation, groups with subtle gestures and glances, Emma and James with their spouses, laughing at something Robert had said, and Daniel, standing slightly apart, checking his phone with a furrowed brow. Probably wondering why Rachel hadn't responded to his latest message, unaware that I knew about their relationship, their plans, their future that excluded me. I felt strangely detached, observing them like a security analyst watching camera footage for patterns and vulnerabilities. The Morgans operated as a system, complex, interdependent, designed to protect their interests above all else. And like any system, they had weaknesses they couldn't see from within. A knock at the pool house door pulled me from my thoughts. I quickly closed my laptop and moved to answer it. Sophia, James's wife of 3 years, stood on the threshold, with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. "Thought you might like some company," she said with a smile that seemed genuine. "The Morgan family summit in there is getting a bit intense." I hesitated, then stepped back to let her in. Sophia had always been the most approachable of the Morgan connections, married into the family like me, but somehow better at navigating its currents. Her blonde hair and country club background had eased her acceptance in ways my Chinese-American identity never could, but I'd occasionally caught glimpses of strain behind her perfect smile. "James is deep in business talk with Robert," she explained, pouring the wine. "I figured I'd escape while I could." "Smart move," I replied, accepting the glass she offered. Sophia settled onto the sofa, tucking her feet beneath her in a casual pose that seemed at odds with the formal Morgan atmosphere. "So," she said after a sip of wine, "how are you really doing? And don't give me the Morgan-approved answer. I get enough of those." The unexpected candor caught me off guard. "What makes you think I'm not doing well?" She gave me a knowing look. "Please, I've been watching the Patricia Daniel dance for 3 years now. Something's up, and whatever it is, you're on the outside of it." I studied her face, looking for signs of deception or information gathering on Patricia's behalf. Finding none, I decided on a partial truth. "Daniel and I are going through a rough patch," I admitted. "Coming here probably wasn't the best idea." Sophia nodded. "James and I had our Morgan crisis in year 2. Patricia helpfully suggested a marriage counselor who turned out to be her college roommate." She rolled her eyes. Every session somehow concluded that I needed to better understand the special pressures of being a Morgan man. Despite everything, I laughed. That sounds exactly like Patricia. "The thing is," Sophia continued, her voice lower, "they close ranks. Always. You think you're married to one person, but you're actually married to the collective Morgan consciousness." "How do you handle it?" I asked, genuinely curious how this woman had survived what I clearly hadn't. She shrugged. "I created clear boundaries, separate finances, regular escapes to visit my own family, selective hearing when Patricia makes suggestions." She took another sip of wine. And honestly, I document everything. Every manipulative comment, every undermining move. James knows I keep receipts. The casual admission stunned me. Sophia had been playing the same protective game I had, but from within the system rather than preparing to leave it. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Her expression grew serious. "Because I like you, Olivia. You're the only person at these family gatherings with a real personality. And because—" She hesitated, then continued. "I overheard Patricia and Robert discussing seating arrangements for tomorrow. Your name wasn't on the list." So Sophia knew, at least partially. I wondered how much more she had overheard, how much more she suspected. "That's interesting," I said carefully. "It's bullshit," Sophia corrected, her perfect country club facade cracking slightly. "Whatever they're planning, it's not right." Before I could respond, her phone chimed. She checked it and sighed. "James looking for me? God forbid I'm not. Readily available when he's done with guy time." She stood, gathering her things. "Just watch yourself tomorrow, okay? The Morgans script everything, and they never cast outsiders in leading roles." After she left, I returned to the window. The gathering on the terrace had dispersed, family members moving inside as the evening cooled. I watched until the lights in various rooms of the main house came on, illuminating fragments of Morgan life. Patricia in her sitting room, arranging flowers with precise movements. Robert in his study, phone to his ear. Emma and her husband in the kitchen, getting late-night snacks. No sign of Daniel. I checked my own phone and found a message from him. "Meeting running long. Don't wait up." He wasn't coming back to the pool house tonight. The pieces clicked into place. He couldn't face sleeping beside me knowing what tomorrow would bring. Couldn't maintain the pretense of normalcy with the weight of his planned betrayal between us. I changed into sleepwear and went through the motions of my nightly routine, my mind calculating options and outcomes. The technical part of me, the security specialist who anticipated system failures and planned countermeasures, was fully engaged now. If the Morgans wanted to execute a public removal, they would expect one of two responses: a scene that would confirm their narrative about my unsuitability, or quiet acceptance that would allow them to control the story afterward. Either way, they would emerge with their reputation intact and their version of events unchallenged. I needed a third option. Sleep came in fragments that night, broken by strategic planning and emotional processing. By morning, I had formulated my approach, not revenge, which would only validate their perception of me, but reclamation of my narrative and my dignity. The day of the anniversary celebration dawned bright and clear, sunlight sparkling off, the lake like scattered diamonds. I dressed casually for breakfast, which would be served on the main house terrace, according to the weekend schedule Patricia had distributed upon our arrival. Daniel appeared at the pool house door, just as I was finishing my makeup, looking tired but composed in khaki shorts and a polo shirt embroidered with the Morgan Tech logo. Another uniform for another performance. "Morning," he said with forced brightness. "Sleep well?" "Well enough," I replied, matching his casual tone. "Your meeting ran late." He had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Yeah, Dad needed help with some anniversary details. Did you get my text?" "I did. Ready for breakfast?" He seemed surprised by my easy acceptance of his excuse, the lack of questions or accusations. Perhaps he had expected the beginning of the end to be more dramatic. Breakfast was a carefully choreographed affair. Patricia had arranged the seating to separate me from Daniel, placing him between his father and sister while I was relegated to the far end of the table, beside a distant cousin who had arrived late the previous night. The conversation flowed around topics deemed suitable for family gatherings: updates on renovation projects, children's academic achievements, upcoming charity events. Nothing controversial, nothing revealing. Classic Morgan deflection from the tension simmering beneath the surface. I ate my fruit and croissant, sipped my coffee, and offered appropriate responses when addressed directly, which was rarely. My assigned breakfast companion, Cousin Timothy, was more interested in his phone than conversation, which suited me perfectly. From my position at the table's end, I observed the family dynamics with new clarity. How Patricia controlled the conversation flow with subtle prompts and redirections. How Robert deferred to her in social settings while maintaining the appearance of patriarchal authority. How my husband watched his mother for cues on when to laugh, when to contribute, when to shift topics. Most revealing was how they collectively maintained the illusion of my inclusion while systematically excluding me from meaningful interaction. Breakfast questions directed my way were surface level and required no substantial response. Mentions of future family plans carefully avoided specifics that would highlight my intended absence from them. It was masterfully done, this gentle erasure. Had I not known what was coming, I might have attributed the distant treatment to typical Morgan formality rather than the beginning of my excision from their narrative. After breakfast, the family dispersed for morning activities. A hiking group formed for those wanting to explore the nearby trails. Others gathered for tennis at the estate's private court. Daniel volunteered for the hike, citing a need for exercise after travel. "You'll join us, Olivia?" Emma asked with calculated politeness, knowing I preferred swimming to hiking. "I think I'll enjoy the pool this morning," I replied, "but thank you for the invitation." Daniel looked relieved, having engineered another few hours of separation before the evening's confrontation. "I'll see you for lunch then," he said, kissing my cheek perfunctorily before joining the hiking group. Once alone, I returned to the pool house and changed into a swimsuit. The Olympic-sized infinity pool behind the main house was unoccupied, the staff having cleared breakfast and retreated to invisible positions until needed again. I swam laps, the rhythmic movement clearing my head and strengthening my resolve. With each stroke, I shed another layer of doubt, another fragment of the identity I'd constructed to please the Morgans. With each breath, I reclaimed another piece of myself, the confident security specialist, the woman who had built a reputation on finding weaknesses in seemingly impenetrable systems. After swimming, I showered and dressed for lunch, selecting a simple sundress rather than the designer options Patricia would expect. Small rebellions felt significant now, each choice moving me further from Morgan expectations and closer to my authentic self. Lunch was served poolside, a casual buffet of salads and sandwiches. Family members drifted in from their morning activities, filling plates and forming conversation clusters around the shaded tables. Patricia approached as I selected a salad from the spread, her voice low and confidential. "Olivia, dear, I've had your blue Burberry dress pressed for this evening. The photographer will arrive at 7:30, and I thought that would complement the family palette nicely." The blue dress, conservative, expensive, and selected by Patricia during a shopping trip she had insisted on, was exactly what a Morgan wife should wear. It was also the opposite of what I had planned. "That's very thoughtful," I replied with a smile that revealed nothing. "But I've already selected something for tonight." A slight crease appeared between her perfectly maintained eyebrows. "Oh? I don't recall seeing anything suitable in your luggage when the staff unpacked." The casual admission of privacy violation, staff reporting on my possessions, didn't surprise me. The Morgan surveillance system had many components, human and digital. "I packed it separately," I said, still smiling. "A special piece for a special occasion." Before she could inquire further, Robert called her name from across the patio, providing me a perfect exit from the conversation. I moved to a table where James and Sophia sat with their plates, slipping into the vacant chair beside them. James acknowledged me with a nod before continuing his conversation with another relative about Morgan Tech's latest acquisition. Sophia, however, gave me a subtle look of concern. "Everything okay?" she asked quietly when James's attention was fully engaged elsewhere. Absolutely, I replied with more confidence than I'd felt in months. Just finalizing my plans for tonight. She studied my face for a moment, then nodded slowly. Good for you, she said, and I had the distinct impression she understood more than I'd explicitly shared. The afternoon passed in a blur of carefully scheduled leisure activities. I participated minimally, using preparation for the evening as an excuse to retreat to the pool house. There, I accessed the secure server where Jin had stored my documentation, confirming everything was in place for whatever aftermath followed tonight's revelation. At 5:30, I began preparing for the evening celebration. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Meeting family at restaurant at 7:15. Driver will pick you up at 7. Blue dress from mom looks great with the sapphire earrings I gave you for our anniversary. Another script, another performance directive. I didn't bother responding. Instead, I retrieved the garment bag I'd hidden beneath winter clothes in my suitcase. Items Patricia's staff wouldn't have bothered to unpack for a summer gathering. Inside was the red chipao, with its high collar and delicate black and gold embroidery. I dressed carefully, appreciating how the silk hugged my body in a way Patricia would deem inappropriate for family functions. I styled my hair in a sleek updo adorned with the jade hairpins my grandmother had given me for my college graduation. My makeup was bolder than the Morgan-approved natural palette, with defined eyes and crimson lips that matched the dress. Around my neck, I fastened a jade pendant instead of the sapphire necklace from Daniel that completed the Morgan-sanctioned look. In my ears, small jade drops replaced the expected diamond studs. The final touch was tucking the encrypted flash drive into the small evening bag I'd selected. Not the Chanel clutch Daniel had given me last Christmas, but a vintage beaded piece I'd found at a Portland market before meeting him. When I studied my reflection, I barely recognized the woman looking back at me. Not because I had transformed into someone new, but because I had reverted to someone authentic, the woman I'd been before the Morgans had systematically erased her. At precisely 7 Dao, a sleek black car pulled up outside the pool house. The driver, professionally expressionless, held the door as I emerged. If he was surprised by my appearance, so different from what the Morgans typically expected, he gave no indication. The drive to the lakeside restaurant was brief, but allowed me precious minutes of solitude to center myself for what was coming. I watched the pristine shoreline pass by the window, sunlight still bright in the summer evening, gilding the water and surrounding pines. The restaurant was exclusive, positioned on a rocky promontory with panoramic views of the lake. Its stone and glass architecture blended with the natural landscape while exuding unmistakable luxury. Patricia would have reserved it months in advance, ensuring the perfect backdrop for both celebration and the dramatic conclusion of my marriage. As the car approached, I could see the Morgan family gathered outside the entrance. Patricia resplendent in champagne-colored silk, Robert distinguished in a summer weight suit, Emma and James with their spouses, assorted relatives arranged in a tableau of wealth and belonging. Daniel stood slightly apart, checking his watch, his expression a mixture of anticipation and dread. He looked up as the car stopped and froze momentarily when I emerged, his eyes widening at my appearance. The collective Morgan reaction was subtle, but unmistakable. A slight stiffening of postures, exchanged glances, Patricia's tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Olivia. Daniel moved forward, his voice low and strained. What are you wearing? A dress from my heritage, I replied simply. Perfect for celebrations, don't you think? Before he could respond, Patricia approached, her assessment of my appearance barely concealed behind social pleasantries. Olivia, dear, what an interesting choice. Though I thought we discussed the blue Burberry for tonight. You discussed it, I corrected gently. I chose this instead. A flicker of displeasure crossed her face before she recovered. Well, we should head inside. The photographer is waiting and we have a schedule to keep. Of course they did. The Morgan schedule, my exclusion from family photos, followed by dinner where my seat would be conspicuously absent, culminating in Daniel's announcement of our separation. All perfectly timed, all meticulously planned. As we entered the restaurant's private room, I felt a strange calm descend. The space was beautiful, windows overlooking the lake, tables adorned with white roses and peonies, Patricia's favorites, champagne flutes catching the golden evening light. The photographer, a slim man with an air of practiced discretion, consulted briefly with Patricia before beginning to arrange the family for photos. I stepped back, watching the choreography unfold exactly as outlined in the anniversary schedule I'd seen on Patricia's computer. First, the entire Morgan family, positioned against the backdrop of the lake. Then smaller groupings, Patricia and Robert with their children, siblings together, grandparents with grandchildren. Each combination meticulously recorded, each grouping excluding me through some natural-seeming arrangement. I didn't attempt to insert myself into any photo. I simply observed, noting how Daniel's smile grew increasingly strained as the process continued, how Patricia kept glancing in my direction as if assessing my reaction to the deliberate exclusion. Finally, as the sunset painted the sky in brilliant orange and pink hues, Patricia made the announcement I'd been waiting for. "Everyone gather around for the family photo," she called, her voice carrying across the room. I stepped forward with the others, smoothing my red silk dress. "Not you, Olivia," my mother-in-law said quietly, her smile never wavering. "We need Morgan family only for this one." The moment crystallized everything. 5 years of subtle digs, of separate accommodations, of conversations that stopped when I entered rooms. I wasn't family. I never had been, and in that moment, I realized I never would be. Not because I hadn't tried hard enough, but because they had never intended to let me in. As I stepped back, watching my husband join his parents without even a glance in my direction, I made my decision. The encrypted flash drive in my purse suddenly felt heavier. After 5 years of marriage, it was time they knew exactly who they'd been excluding. The photographer's camera clicked rapidly, capturing the Morgan dynasty in perfect formation. Patricia's hand rested on Daniel's shoulder. Robert stood tall and dignified at the center. Emma and James flanked their parents with practiced smiles. The perfect family portrait, complete without me. I stood to the side, watching this performance. I'd witnessed so many times before, but now with clear eyes. I no longer felt the sting of exclusion. Instead, I felt the strange lightness that comes with absolute clarity. I knew exactly who I was and what I needed to do. As the photographer finished the final shots, the restaurant staff began ushering everyone toward the dining area. Crystal glasses sparkled under ambient lighting, white linen tablecloths draped elegantly over the tables, and place cards marked each setting with calligraphy that had undoubtedly been approved by Patricia. I didn't bother looking for my name. I knew it wouldn't be there. The Morgan family moved toward the table, a choreographed dance of wealth and privilege. Daniel's eyes darted toward me, then away quickly, guilt flickering across his face before he composed himself. Patricia surveyed the scene with satisfaction, nodding to the restaurant manager who hovered nearby for approval. Robert raised his hand, summoning everyone's attention. "Before we sit down, Patricia and I want to thank you all for joining us to celebrate 40 years of marriage and family. The Morgan legacy continues strong because of the values we share and the bonds we've created." The assembled family members nodded appreciatively, some raising their champagne flutes in acknowledgement. "Now," Robert continued, "let's enjoy this wonderful dinner Patricia has arranged." Family members began finding their assigned seats, the rustle of expensive fabrics and murmur of conversation filling the space. I remained standing, observing as each person found their place card and settled in. 12 settings, 12 seats, just as I'd seen in Patricia's planning document. Daniel had been placed between his mother and a female cousin who bore a striking resemblance to Rachel Wilson, the same blonde hair and delicate features, a visual reminder of what Patricia considered the correct match for her son. He glanced up, caught my eye, and had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Is something wrong?" Patricia asked, noticing that I hadn't moved toward the table. "I seem to be missing a seat," I replied evenly. A moment of calculated confusion crossed Patricia's face. "Oh dear, has there been a miscounting? Let me see." She made a show of surveying the table while the family watched, some with genuine confusion, others, like Emma, with the slight satisfaction of witnessing an anticipated scene. "I count 12 settings," Robert said with a frown that appeared genuine. He, at least, might not have been aware of this particular detail in Patricia's plan. Daniel half rose from his chair, his discomfort now obvious. "There must be some mistake with the reservation. I'll speak to the manager." "There's no mistake," I interrupted, my voice calm despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "The reservation was made for 12. I've seen the document." Patricia's smile froze. "What document would that be, dear?" "The anniversary planning document on your shared drive. The one that specifies family photos only. Oh, not included at 7:45 p.m. followed by the dinner for 12, not 13. A tense silence fell over the table. Several family members exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with this unexpected turn. Patricia recovered first, her social training taking over. "Olivia, perhaps we should discuss this privately." "Why? Would we need privacy?" This was planned as a public removal, wasn't it? Scheduled right before Daniel's announcement about our separation at 9:30 p.m. Daniel stood fully now, color draining from his face. "Olivia, please..." "Please what, Daniel? Please maintain the facade? Please allow myself to be humiliated according to the Morgan schedule? Or please don't reveal that I know about Rachel, about the divorce plans, about Judge Williams expediting the proceedings?" Every Morgan face turned toward me, expressions ranging from shock to anger to embarrassment. The cousin beside Daniel, Jessica, I remembered, reached for her water glass with a trembling hand. I removed the encrypted flash drive from my evening bag and held it up. "I have copies of everything, the emails between all of you discussing my replacement, the offshore accounts where Robert has been hiding assets before the divorce filing, the corporate documents showing systematic privacy violations at Morgan Tech." Robert stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "That's enough. This is a private family celebration that you're disrupting. A celebration that was intended to conclude with my public dismissal," I countered. "I'm simply adjusting the timeline." Patricia's mask slipped, genuine anger flashing in her eyes. "How dare you threaten this family after everything we've done for you?" I laughed, the sound genuine and liberating. "What exactly have you done for me, Patricia? Criticized my heritage? Undermined my career? Planned to replace me with Rachel while I was still naively trying to earn your approval?" You're making a scene," Emma hissed, looking around at the restaurant staff who were doing their professional best to appear oblivious to the drama unfolding. "No," I replied calmly. "I'm refusing to follow your script. There's a difference." Daniel approached me, his voice low and urgent. "Olivia, please, not like this. We can talk privately. The way you've been privately talking with Rachel for the past 6 months? Or the way you've been privately discussing divorce strategies with your parents while sharing my bed?" He flinched as if I'd slapped him. "It wasn't. I didn't want it to happen this way." "No, you wanted it to happen your way. The Morgan way. Clean, controlled, with the family presenting a unified front." I echoed Patricia's email word for word, watching Daniel recognize his mother's phrasing. Patricia rose from her seat, abandoning pretense. "Whatever you think you... No, whatever you think you have, remember that you signed a prenuptial agreement that includes significant penalties for disparaging the Morgan name." "The prenup I signed under false pretenses? The one that's invalidated by Daniel's infidelity and the family's deliberate concealment of financial information. I smiled. Your family lawyer should have advised you better. Robert moved toward me, his voice dropping to ensure only I could hear. Name your price, whatever you want, we can discuss it privately. The offer was so predictable, so typically Morgan, that it almost made me sad. They still didn't understand that this wasn't about money or leverage. It was about refusing to be erased. I don't want your money, Robert, I never did. I addressed the gathering, raising my voice slightly. For those wondering what's happening, allow me to introduce myself properly. I'm Olivia Chen, one of the top cybersecurity specialists in the country before I was persuaded that being a Morgan wife was more important than my career. I held up my phone, having prepared for this moment. With a few taps, I connected to the restaurant's audio-visual system, another security vulnerability I'd noted during earlier Morgan events. The large display screen installed for corporate functions came to life, showing my professional credentials and achievements that the Morgans had consistently minimized. I've spent 5 years trying to be family to people who decided before they met me that I never would be. Not because of any failing on my part, but because of what I represent, a world outside Morgan control. The screen changed to show a series of emails between Patricia and Daniel, discussing how to manage me during family events, how to gradually shift my focus from my career to more appropriate Morgan wife activities. Several relatives gasped. James muttered something to Sophia, who shook her head slightly, her expression unreadable. Patricia's face had gone rigid with fury. "Turn that off immediately," Robert commanded, moving toward the AV controls near the bar. "That won't help." "Robert," I called calmly. "Everything I'm showing here has already been secured elsewhere, but don't worry. Unlike your company, I believe in ethical information management." He froze, then turned back, his expression a mixture of rage and fear. "I'm not here to destroy you," I continued. "I'm here to free myself. So here are my terms. A clean, fair divorce with no attempts to enforce the prenup I signed under false pretenses. My evidence stays secure unless you attempt to damage my reputation or career." I paused, watching the calculations happening, behind Robert's eyes. The businessman in him was already assessing damages, weighing options, determining the most cost-effective solution. "I'll even sign an NDA about Morgan Tech's business practices," I added, "provided the company implements actual security fixes for your customers' data within 6 months. You can't just—" Patricia began, outrage overcoming her usual self-control. "I can, and I am," I interrupted. "You planned this weekend as my exit from the Morgan family. I'm simply taking control of my own departure." I turned to Daniel, who stood pale and silent nearby. "You could have told me you weren't happy. You could have been honest about Rachel. Instead, you let me believe I was the problem, too ethnic, too independent, too much myself to be a Morgan." "Olivia, he started. "It's Ms. Chen now," I corrected him, "and I think we've all pretended enough for one evening." I disconnected my phone from the system, the display returning to the Morgan Tech logo that had been set as the default screen. With deliberate movements, I gathered my evening bag and prepared to leave. "I've already arranged for a car," I said. "I'll be staying at the Lakeside Hotel tonight and flying back to Seattle tomorrow. My lawyer will be in touch regarding the divorce terms." As I moved toward the exit, Patricia's voice stopped me, not with its usual controlled authority, but with a raw edge I'd never heard before. "You think this display of theatrics changes anything? You'll always be the outsider who couldn't adapt, who couldn't understand our world. Daniel will recover. The family will recover. But you? You'll be remembered as the bitter woman who couldn't maintain a place in the Morgan family." I turned back, meeting her gaze directly. "I'd rather be remembered as the woman who refused to erase herself to please others. After all, isn't authenticity more valuable than acceptance based on pretense? For the first time in our 5-year relationship, Patricia Morgan had no ready response. As I walked away, Sophia unexpectedly rose from her seat and followed me. James called after her, but she ignored him, catching up to me near the restaurant entrance. "That was the most incredible thing I've ever seen," she whispered, her eyes wide with something like awe. "They've been slowly trying to Morganize me too." I studied her face, seeing the genuine emotion there, and softened. "When you're ready to talk, call me. Unlike them, I believe in women supporting women." I pressed my business card into her hand, my new card, with my maiden name and the cybersecurity consultancy I'd been quietly building for the past year. The night air felt clean and crisp as I stepped outside, carrying the scent of pine and lake water. The car I'd arranged was waiting, the driver standing at attention beside the open door. As I slid into the back seat, I caught a glimpse of the Morgan family through the restaurant's windows. Frozen in a tableau of disruption, their perfectly orchestrated evening shattered. For the first time in years, I felt completely, authentically, myself. At the Lakeside Hotel, I checked into the suite I'd reserved that morning, another detail in my counter strategy. The space was impersonal, but luxurious, with none of the Morgan family's fingerprints on its design or arrangements. I kicked off my heels and moved to the balcony overlooking the water, where the moon now traced a silver path across the dark surface. The night was quiet, except for the gentle lapping of waves against the shore below. I pulled out my phone and called Mia, my best friend who had warned me about the Morgans from the beginning. "It's done," I told her when she answered. "Are you okay?" The concern in her voice made my eyes sting with the first tears of the evening. "I'm better than okay," I replied, surprising myself with how true it felt. "I'm free." Mia's relief was audible. "Thank God. When you said you were going to that anniversary thing, I was worried they'd suck you back in somehow. Not a chance. Not anymore." I gave her a condensed version of the evening's events, her periodic gasps and exclamations of "no way," providing a cathartic counterpoint to my story. "So what happens now?" she asked when I'd finished. "Now I rebuild. My company, my identity, my life." "Your company already has 3 major clients," Mia reminded me. "And your identity was never actually lost, just temporarily muted for the Daniel Morgan experience." I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in years. "True. And now, I can turn the volume back up." After saying goodnight to Mia, I ordered room service, spicy Szechuan noodles that Patricia would have deemed inappropriate dinner fare, and began planning my next steps. The Morgan script had been torn up, which meant I was now writing my own. My phone buzzed periodically throughout the evening, text messages from Daniel ranging from angry to pleading to remorseful. I read each one but didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. More surprising were the messages from Sophia, sent via Signal, the encrypted messaging app I'd given her my contact for. The aftermath here is nuclear. Patricia practically had a meltdown after you left. Then, Roberts locked himself in. The study with the family lawyers on conference call. And finally, Daniel keeps saying you wouldn't really expose anything, that you're bluffing. Are you? I responded to that one. I never bluff about security threats, but I prefer not to deploy countermeasures unless attacked first. Her reply came quickly. Noted and respected. This family could use more straightforward communication and fewer strategic dinner seatings. I smiled, sensing a potential ally. I hadn't anticipated. The Morgans' united front was perhaps not as unified as they believed. Around midnight, a final text came from Daniel. "We need to talk. There are things you don't understand about the family situation." I typed a response, considered it carefully, then pressed send. "I understand perfectly. I'm just not willing to be collateral damage in the Morgan family narrative anymore. Then I silenced my phone, took a long shower, and slept better than I had in months. Morning brought a cascade of notifications, voicemails from Robert, texts from various family members who'd been present at dinner, and a tersely worded email from the Morgan family attorney requesting an immediate confidential consultation. I ignored them all, packed my few belongings, and checked out of the hotel. My flight back to Seattle wasn't until afternoon, so I treated myself to breakfast at a local cafe, sitting on the patio with a view of the lake and mountains. As I sipped my coffee, a shadow fell across my table. I looked up to find Daniel standing there, his normally immaculate appearance disheveled, suggesting a sleepless night. "May I join you?" he asked, his voice rough with fatigue. I considered refusing, but decided closure required one final conversation. I gestured to the empty chair across from me. He sat heavily, running a hand through his uncombed hair. "You've certainly gotten everyone's attention." "That wasn't my goal," I replied evenly, though it seems to be the only way to get honest communication from the Morgans. "What you did last night was take control of a situation your family had orchestrated without my knowledge or consent," I interrupted. "Don't try to make me the villain in this story, Daniel. I'm not the one who plotted to humiliate my spouse at a family dinner." He had the grace to look ashamed. "It wasn't supposed to happen that way. I wanted to tell you privately, but Mother insisted." "That's been the problem all along, hasn't it? What your mother insisted on always took precedence over what was right or fair to me." He didn't deny it, which was something at least. "How did you find out about everything?" "I'm a cybersecurity specialist, Daniel. Finding hidden information is literally what I do. Or did, before being a Morgan became my full-time occupation." He winced. "I never asked you to give up your career." "No, you just stood by while your family systematically undermined it. Suggested it wasn't suitable, directed me toward more appropriate activities." "I thought you wanted to be part of the family," he said, a note of genuine confusion in his voice. "I wanted to be part of your life, but that apparently came with conditions I was never told about until I failed to meet them." We sat in silence. For a moment, the weight of 5 years of miscommunication and unmet expectations between us. "What happens now?" he finally asked. "Are you really going to expose everything?" "That depends on you and your family," I replied honestly. "I meant what I said. I don't want destruction. I want a clean break and the freedom to rebuild my life without Morgan interference." "And Rachel?" he asked quietly. "Is your business?" "Now, not mine." I met his eyes directly. I hope she understands what she's signing up for. The Morgan family experience comes with fine print that isn't always visible until you're already committed. He looked away, perhaps recognizing the truth in my words. "The lawyers want to meet with you." "They can contact my lawyer," I said, sliding a business card across the table. "Elaine Wasserman. She's expecting their call." Daniel picked up the card, studying it as if it contained some code he needed to decipher. "This feels so formal, after everything we've been through." "Formal is appropriate when concluding a business arrangement, which is apparently what our marriage was to your family, a temporary merger that didn't meet expectations." He flinched at the description. "It wasn't like that for me. Not at first. I did love you, Olivia." "Perhaps," I acknowledged, "but not enough to choose me over family expectations. Not enough to be honest when things changed. Not enough to give me the dignity of a private conversation instead of a public dismissal." He had no response to that. I finished my coffee and gathered my things, preparing to leave. "Goodbye, Daniel. I'd say it's been a pleasure, but we've had enough dishonesty in our relationship." As I stood, he caught my hand. "For what it's worth, I am sorry. Not just for how it ended, but for not being strong enough to stand up for you along the way. I gently removed my hand from his. I hope you find that strength someday. Rachel might need it more than you realize. Walking away from that cafe, from Daniel, from 5 years of trying to fit into a space that was never designed to accommodate me, I felt an almost physical lightness. The red chipao from last night was packed in my suitcase, but I carried its symbolic freedom with me in the straight line of my shoulders and the steady rhythm of my steps. My departure from Lake Tahoe was uneventful. No Morgan family members appeared to create scenes at the airport or make last-minute appeals. They had retreated to regroup, to consult lawyers, to develop new strategies. I had expected nothing less, from a family that valued control above all else. The flight to Seattle gave me 3 uninterrupted hours to plan my next steps. I made notes on my tablet, outlining the immediate priorities: secure new permanent housing, formalize the divorce terms through my lawyer, accelerate the development of my cybersecurity consultancy. I also drafted a message to send to Patricia once I landed, not out of obligation, but to establish clear boundaries for the separation process. Patricia, I expect you'll want to control the narrative around my departure from the Morgan family. You may tell your social circle whatever story preserves your dignity, with these conditions. 1. No disparagement of my professional capabilities or personal character. 2. No interference with my business relationships or career opportunities. 3. No contact through indirect channels or third parties. In return, I will maintain discretion regarding family, matters I was privy to during my marriage. This arrangement relies on mutual respect for boundaries. Regards, Olivia Chen. Direct, clear, and unmistakably on my terms. Everything my communication with the Morgans had not been for 5 years. When the plane touched down in Seattle, I felt the strangest sensation, as if I were returning to a city I knew intimately but was seeing with new eyes. The familiar skyline beyond the airport windows represented not the backdrop of my Morgan life, but the canvas for whatever came next. I sent the drafted message to Patricia, then took a rideshare to the Queen Anne house I had shared with Daniel. Using my key, which I knew would soon need to be surrendered, I entered and went directly to the home office that had always been my space. Methodically, I gathered my essential belongings, my personal laptop and backup drives. Important. Documents, the few pieces of artwork and books that had special meaning to me. I left behind anything Daniel had given me or that had been selected to conform to Morgan aesthetics. In our bedroom, I collected only my personal clothing and jewelry, leaving the designer pieces that Patricia had guided me toward. The sapphire earrings from Daniel remained in their velvet box on the dresser. The jade earrings I'd worn the previous night stayed in my ears, a small but significant reclamation. As I packed these items into my car, our neighbor, Mrs. Abernathy, spotted me from her garden and approached with concern. "Olivia, dear, is everything all right? Where's Daniel?" I gave her the simplified version, the only one she needed. "Daniel and I are separating, Mrs. Abernathy. I'm collecting some of my things today." Her eyes widened with the delicious scandal of it. "Oh my. I had no idea there were problems. You always seemed like such a perfect couple." "Appearances can be deceiving," I replied with a small smile. "But some things are better resolved honestly. Don't you think?" She nodded sagely, though I suspected my departure would be the subject of neighborhood gossip before sunset. The Morgans would have to manage that small ripple in their social pond without my help. With my essential belongings secured, I drove to the extended stay hotel I'd booked the previous week, another preparation that Daniel and his family hadn't anticipated. The suite was spacious enough to live comfortably for a month, which would give me time to find a permanent residence without pressure. As I unpacked the few things I'd need immediately, my phone buzzed with a notification. An email from Robert Morgan. "Olivia, your message to Patricia has been received. The family." agrees to your terms with the following additions. 1. All Morgan Tech proprietary information remains confidential. 2. You will coordinate with our attorney for one final meeting to formalize separation arrangements. 3. Daniel will contact you directly regarding division of household items. The family acknowledges your desire for a clean break and will respect appropriate boundaries going forward. Regards, Robert Morgan. The formal, businesslike tone was so typically Robert. No emotion, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, simply a negotiation between parties with different interests. Still, it represented a significant shift in the power dynamic. They were responding to my terms rather than dictating theirs. I forwarded the email to Elaine Wasserman with a brief note. They're ready to deal reasonably. Let's proceed. Then I ordered dinner from a nearby Chinese restaurant, authentic Hunan cuisine that Patricia had always deemed too exotic for family meals, and began setting up my workspace in the hotel suite. As night fell over Seattle, I stood at the window looking out at the city lights. Somewhere across town, the Morgans would be managing the fallout from my departure, crafting explanations for their social circle, recalibrating their family narrative. But I was no longer a character in their story. For the first time in 5 years, I was the author of my own. 6 months after Lake Tahoe, I stood at the windows of my downtown Seattle office, watching ferries glide across Elliott Bay toward the distant Olympic Mountains. The morning sun transformed the water into a shimmering canvas of gold and blue, beauty I could appreciate fully now, without the constant undercurrent of anxiety that had characterized my final years with the Morgans. The sign on my door read, Chen Security Solutions, elegant and understated. Inside, framed certifications and industry awards, some predating my marriage, others newly acquired. Lined one wall, no longer hidden away as they had been in the eye. Queen Anne House, where Patricia had deemed them too professional for proper home decor. The modern space featured clean lines, ergonomic furniture, and artwork that blended traditional Chinese elements with contemporary designs. A visual representation of the identity I'd reclaimed. Mia knocked lightly before entering, tablet in hand. As my operations director and oldest friend, she moved through the space with comfortable familiarity. The Henderson healthcare proposal is ready for final review, she announced, settling into one of the chairs across from my desk. And Elaine just called. The last of the paperwork is officially filed and processed. You are formally, legally, and completely divorced. Thank you, I said, accepting the tablet and scanning the security assessment we'd prepared for a regional healthcare system. The proposal was comprehensive, innovative, and distinctly mine. No Morgan suggestions, diluting my expertise or approach. So, Mia leaned forward, her expression serious but eyes bright with genuine interest. How does it feel to be officially, completely, 100% not a Morgan anymore? I considered the question, surprised by my emotional response. Not grief or regret, but a profound sense of completion, like the satisfying click of a complex lock finally released. Like setting down a weight I hadn't fully recognized I was carrying, I replied. I didn't realize how exhausting it was constantly, translating myself into Morgan-acceptable language until I stopped having to do it. Good riddance to bad Morgans, Mia declared, raising an imaginary toast. I laughed, the sound freer than it had been in years. Some weren't entirely awful. Sophia's been thriving since leaving James. Her interior design business already has 3 major clients. Another successful Morgan wife escapee, Mia noted. You should start a support group. I prefer to think of it as a success network, I corrected, signing off on the Henderson proposal and returning the tablet. The divorce had proceeded exactly as I'd outlined that night at Lake Tahoe. Clean, fair, and without public drama. The prenup was set aside after my lawyer presented evidence of Daniel's infidelity and the family's deliberate financial concealment. I received a settlement that, while less than what I could have demanded with my leverage, provided more than enough to secure my fresh start and fund the expansion of Chen Security Solutions. More satisfying than the financial settlement was watching Morgan Tech quietly implement the security fixes I'd specified in my parting terms. They never acknowledged me publicly, of course, but industry insiders recognized the source of their sudden focus on consumer privacy and data protection. Several Morgan Tech security specialists had even reached out with discreet job inquiries, sensing the shifting dynamics in the corporate landscape. My phone buzzed with a notification. An email from an unfamiliar address with the subject line, "Congratulations on your recent success." Curious, I opened it. "Olivia, I've been following the growth of Chen Security Solutions with interest. Your recent work with Westlake Financial on their security infrastructure upgrade was particularly impressive. The industry has been buzzing about your innovative approach to their legacy system challenges. Perhaps you might consider coffee sometime. There's a potential project I'd like to discuss that would benefit from your particular expertise. Regards, Rachel Wilson, Director of Digital Innovation, Westlake Technologies." I stared at the screen, momentarily stunned by the audacity. Rachel Wilson, Daniel's college girlfriend, now fiancée, the woman he had conducted an affair with during our marriage, reaching out professionally as if our connection was merely industry-related. Mia, noticing my expression, raised an eyebrow. "What? Bad news?" I handed her my phone, watching her eyes widen as she read. "You have got to be kidding me," she muttered. The absolute nerve of this woman. "It's actually a shrewd tactical move," I said, analytical even in my surprise. "Westlake and Morgan Tech are competitors. She's signaling that business transcends personal histories." "Or she's gathering intelligence about you for the Morgans," Mia countered, always the more suspicious of us. Daniel might have moved on, but Patricia never struck me as the type to release control of a narrative. "Possibly," I acknowledged. "Either way, it's not a meeting I need to take." I drafted a brief, professional response. "Ms. Wilson, thank you for your interest in Chen Security Solutions. While I appreciate the outreach, I must decline any potential collaboration with Westlake Technologies at this time due to obvious conflicts of interest. I wish you success with your project and your future endeavors. Regards, Olivia Chen, CEO, Chen Security Solutions." Polite, professional, and unmistakably final. The appropriate response to an inappropriate request. "Perfect," Mia approved as I showed her the reply. "Clear boundaries without giving her anything to use against you. I've become quite skilled at that," I observed, thinking of the various Morgan family members who had attempted to breach my carefully constructed boundaries over the past 6 months. Patricia with her concerned email about items I'd forgotten at the Queen Anne house, designer clothing and jewelry I had deliberately left behind as artifacts of an identity I no longer wanted. Robert with his pointed comments to mutual acquaintances about my fortunate settlement terms, implying generosity rather than legal entitlement. Emma's sudden interest in inviting me to charity events I had previously helped organize, as if our connection remained unchanged despite her silent complicity in my planned removal. Each attempt had been met with polite but firm redirection, gradually teaching them that the Olivia who bent to accommodate Morgan preferences no longer existed. Daniel and I had communicated exclusively through attorneys since Lake Tahoe, usat a mutual decision that simplified the divorce process and preserved what little dignity remained between us. The rumors of his engagement to Rachel had been confirmed 3 months after our separation was finalized, with a tasteful announcement in the Seattle social pages that Patricia had undoubtedly orchestrated, down to the choice of font. According to Sophia, who maintained occasional contact despite distancing herself from the family, the Morgan narrative around our divorce had been carefully crafted. Mutual decision, amicable parting, different life goals. No mention of Rachel's prior relationship with Daniel, no hint of the years-long undermining of my position in the family. Just a clean, palatable story that preserved the Morgan reputation for impeccable life management. And that was fine with me. I had no interest in public drama or prolonged conflict. My victory hadn't been in exposing the Morgans, but in refusing to be erased by them. "Don't forget your dinner with your parents tonight," Mia reminded me as she headed back to her office. "Your mother called earlier to confirm you're still coming. She mentioned bringing some special tea from Portland." "Thanks," I called after her. "Have the Henderson security assessment ready for review tomorrow morning, please." The mention of dinner with my parents brought a genuine smile to my face. Another positive change in my post-Morgan life had been reconnecting with my family. On a deeper level, without the strain of navigating Morgan expectations and social calendars, I'd been able to visit my parents in Portland more regularly and welcome them to Seattle without the undercurrent of tension that had marked their previous visits. My mother had been diplomatic but honest when I first told them about the separation. "We always worried that you were dimming your light to fit into their world," she had said, squeezing my hand across their kitchen table. "But we didn't want to interfere. You seemed determined to make it work." I was, I'd acknowledged. But I eventually realized that making it work meant erasing the parts of myself that didn't fit their image of a Morgan wife. My father, more blunt in his assessment, had simply said, "Their loss. You were always too exceptional for people who couldn't appreciate your uniqueness." The rest of the afternoon passed in a productive blur of client calls, security protocol, reviews, and a video conference with a potential East Coast partner. By 5:30, I was ready to leave the office, another boundary I'd established in my new life, reasonable working hours that left room for personal well-being. My new apartment was in Capitol Hill, a vibrant neighborhood far from the stately elegance of Queen Anne. The renovated warehouse loft featured exposed brick, industrial windows, and an open floor plan I'd furnished with an eclectic mix of contemporary pieces and Asian-influenced design elements. No Morgan decorator had ever set foot in the space, and every item reflected my personal taste rather than socially approved aesthetics. I changed for dinner, selecting a casual but elegant jumpsuit in emerald green, a color Patricia had deemed too bold for my complexion, but that had always been among my favorites. My parents were staying at a downtown hotel during their Seattle visit, and we'd planned to meet at Jade Garden, an authentic Chinese restaurant in the International District that served the regional specialties my father missed from his childhood, in Shanghai. As I drove through the city streets, I reflected on how much had changed in half a year. Not just externally, new home, thriving business, legal freedom from the Morgan name, but internally as well. The constant second-guessing of my words and actions had vanished. The reflexive consideration of, "What would Patricia think?" no longer filtered my decisions. I had reclaimed not just my independence but my internal compass. The restaurant was busy when I arrived, filled with the comforting sounds of Mandarin and Cantonese conversations, the aroma of authentic cuisine far removed from the Asian fusion establishments the Morgans preferred. My parents waved from a corner table, both looking relaxed and happy to see me. "Olivia," my mother rose to embrace me, her familiar jasmine scent enveloping me. "You look wonderful. So vibrant." "Work is going well," I replied, taking the seat across from them. "We just landed another major financial client yesterday." My father beamed with pride. "Always knew you would excel once you returned to your true path. Security was always your calling." The evening unfolded in comfortable conversation and excellent food. We discussed my business expansion plans, my father's upcoming retirement from teaching, my mother's community health initiatives. No tension, no political navigation, no careful editing of topics to avoid cultural misunderstandings. As we finished our tea, my mother reached across the table to cover my hand with hers. "I have something to tell you," she said, her expression suddenly serious. "I wasn't sure whether to bring this up, but I believe you should know." My father nodded, indicating his agreement with whatever she was about to share. "Patricia Morgan called me last week," my mother continued, her voice calm, but her eyes revealing her surprise at the contact. I set down my teacup, genuinely startled. "She called you? Why?" "She wanted to know if we were in touch with you. How you were doing." My mother's thumb stroked the back of my hand soothingly. "She claimed concern about your well-being after such a difficult transition." I felt a familiar tightening in my chest, the physical manifestation of Morgan manipulation attempting to breach my defenses. "What did you tell her?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. My mother was too wise to be drawn into Patricia's information gathering. "I told her that you were an adult fully capable of managing your own relationships and communications," my mother replied with a small smile, "and that if she wished to know how you were doing, she should respect your boundaries and ask you directly." My father chuckled. "Your mother was very polite, but I believe the American expression is that she shut her down." I laughed, the tension dissolving. I would have paid to witness that conversation. She seemed genuinely surprised by the response, my mother added thoughtfully. "I think she expected parental concern to override discretion." "Patricia has always believed that family loyalty trumps individual boundaries," I explained. "It's central to the Morgan worldview." "Not all families operate that way," my father observed. "Healthy ones know that respect strengthens bonds more than control ever could." We finished our meal with lighter conversation, but the revelation of Patricia's outreach lingered in my thoughts. Not because it surprised me. The Morgans had always sought information through indirect channels when direct approaches failed, but because it confirmed that despite all evidence to the contrary, Patricia still believed she was entitled to access my life. After dinner, I hugged my parents goodbye with promises to join them for breakfast before their return to Portland the next day. The evening was mild, and I decided to walk a few blocks before retrieving my car, enjoying the vibrant energy of the city I'd reclaimed as my own. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Olivia, it's Sophia. New number, for obvious reasons. Free for coffee this week? Need your wisdom on setting boundaries with certain Morgan in-laws who don't understand the concept." I smiled, typing a quick response. "Always time for fellow escapees from the Morgan universe. Tomorrow 3 p.m. Cafe Vita on Pike?" Her reply came almost immediately. "Perfect. Bring your emotional armor. Have updates about the anniversary weekend aftermath you wouldn't believe." Another unexpected connection that had emerged from the ruins of my marriage, a genuine friendship with Sophia, who had found her own courage to leave the Morgan orbit 3 months after my dramatic exit. We'd discovered more in common than just our shared experience as Morgan wives, including a love of art, hiking, and unfiltered conversation. Back home in my loft, I kicked off my shoes and poured a glass of wine, carrying it to the small rooftop garden that had been a key selling point for the apartment. The space was coming along nicely, container plants flourishing under my care, comfortable seating arranged to maximize the view of the Seattle skyline. No Morgan landscaper had designed this garden according to appropriate social standards. No Patricia-approved plants or Robert-selected furniture occupied the space. Like everything else in my post-Morgan life, it was authentically, unapologetically mine. I sipped my wine, watching the city lights shimmer against the darkening sky. From this distance, I could see the building that housed Morgan Tech headquarters, its distinctive architecture illuminated against the night. Once the center of my orbit, it was now just another corporate tower in a city skyline, significant to many, but no longer defining my existence. My phone chimed with an email notification. A prospective client I'd been courting had finally committed to a security assessment contract. Another win for Chen Security Solutions, another validation of my professional worth outside the Morgan sphere of influence. As I sent a quick acknowledgement and forwarded the details to Mia for morning follow-up, another email arrived. This one from Daniel. the first direct communication since Lake Tahoe. I hesitated before opening it, briefly wondering if some Morgan family strategy was at play. Curiosity won out. Olivia, I hope this message finds you well. Our attorneys have finalized all outstanding matters, so there's no official reason for this communication. And yet, I find myself needing to write it. Anyway, the announcement of my engagement to Rachel will be in tomorrow's papers. Before that becomes public, I wanted to tell you personally and apologize once more for how everything transpired. There is no excuse for my behavior or my family's treatment of you. And I've come to realize how much I allowed myself to be directed by others' expectations rather than my own integrity. I've heard about your company's success through industry channels. It doesn't surprise me in the least. You were always exceptional, and I regret that I and my family tried to reshape that exceptional quality into something that better fit our narrow definition of what was acceptable. This isn't an attempt to reopen communication or complicate your life. It's simply an acknowledgement that I recognize the harm done and take responsibility for my part in it. I wish you every happiness and success. Daniel. I read the message twice, searching for hidden agendas or manipulations. Finding none, I was left with the unfamiliar sensation of receiving genuine acknowledgement from a Morgan, perhaps the first truly honest communication in our entire relationship. After careful consideration, I composed a brief reply. Daniel, thank you for the courtesy of direct communication. I accept your acknowledgement and wish you clarity as you move forward. Olivia. Not warm, not bitter, simply factual, the most appropriate response to a chapter that was firmly closed. Setting my phone aside, I returned my attention to the city, view and the peaceful solitude of my garden. Tomorrow would bring new clients, new challenges, new opportunities to build the life I had reclaimed. The Morgans would continue their carefully curated existence, perhaps with slightly more awareness of its constraints after my departure had exposed certain weaknesses in their system. And I would continue becoming more fully myself, not in opposition to the Morgan influence, but in authentic alignment with my own values and vision. The next afternoon, I met Sophia at the cafe as planned. She arrived looking radically different from her Morgan wife days. Her previously highlighted blonde hair now returned to its natural rich brown, her conservative wardrobe replaced with artistic layers and statement jewelry. The physical transformation reflected the internal one I knew she'd been experiencing. "Freedom looks good on you," I observed as she slid into the seat across from me. She grinned, a genuine expression that reached her eyes in a way her perfect Morgan smile never had. Feels even better than it looks. Though the emotional fallout has been. She searched for the right word. Intense. Patricia doesn't surrender control gracefully, I noted, remembering my own experience. Understatement of the century, Sophia rolled her eyes. But I didn't ask you here to complain about the Morgan recrimination machine. I wanted to tell you what happened at the anniversary celebration. I raised an eyebrow, genuinely curious. They went ahead with it? Of course they did, Sophia laughed. Morgans never cancel an event just because reality doesn't match their narrative. But oh, it was a disaster of epic proportions. She detailed how the carefully planned Lake Tahoe celebration had unraveled despite Patricia's best efforts to maintain the facade of family perfection. Half the invited guests had declined after hearing rumors about my abrupt departure. Those who did attend asked uncomfortable questions that the family struggled to answer consistently. Daniel had disappeared halfway through the evening, presumably, unable to maintain the performance his mother had scripted. The best part, Sophia continued, leaning forward conspiratorially, was when one of Robert's board members, who'd had too much scotch, asked Patricia directly if it was true that you'd discovered financial irregularities at Morgan Tech. Apparently, her face went through about 5 expressions in 3 seconds before she recovered enough to deflect. I absorbed this information without the satisfaction I might once have expected to feel. The Morgans' social discomfort seemed oddly distant now, a consequence that affected people whose opinions no longer shaped my reality. "How are you handling the separation?" I asked, more interested in Sophia's journey than Morgan gossip. Her expression grew more serious. "Some days are harder than others. James alternates between promising to change and threatening legal action. His lawyer keeps accidentally sending documents to my old email instead of my attorney's. Patricia calls my parents weekly with concerns about my emotional stability. Classic Morgan tactics, I observed. When direct control fails, they triangulate through other relationships." "Exactly," Sophia nodded. "But I've been using what you taught me about information security, documenting everything, communicating only through verifiable channels, securing my personal data." I felt a surge of pride at her resilience. "And your design business?" Her face brightened immediately. "Growing faster than I expected. Turns out when you're not constrained by Patricia's approved aesthetic, you can actually create spaces people want to live in, not just showcase." We spent the next hour sharing strategies for professional growth and personal healing, two women reclaiming their narratives after years of external scripting. Before we parted, Sophia handed me a small gift bag. "Something I thought you should have," she explained. Inside was a beautifully framed photograph, one of the few taken during my marriage that showed me genuinely smiling, standing slightly apart from the Morgan family at some charity function. "Where did you get this?" I asked, touched by the gesture. "James had a copy in his study. I liberated it during my exit," she admitted with a mischievous smile. "Thought you might want it. Not to display necessarily, but as a reminder that even within their system, authentic moments were possible." I thanked her, oddly moved by this tangible connection to a past that had shaped, but no longer defined, me. That evening, as I prepared for a virtual security conference where I would be a featured speaker, I placed Sophia's gift not on my office wall, but in my personal archives. A chapter closed, but not erased. A reminder of growth rather than loss. The conference presentation went exceptionally well. My topic, identifying vulnerabilities in apparently secure systems, drew from my professional expertise, but was inevitably colored by my personal experience. The questions afterward were engaged and thoughtful, several participants reaching out to discuss potential collaborations. As I wrapped up the session, a familiar name appeared in the participant list, Kevin Zhao, the security director whom Morgan Tech had hired over me despite my superior qualifications. The same man whose flawed security proposal I had critiqued during that fateful company retreat, earning Patricia's disapproval for speaking out of turn. A private message from him popped up. "Impressive presentation. Morgan Tech's loss is the industry's gain. Would welcome the chance to discuss ongoing challenges sometime." I responded politely but non-committally. The professional world was complex with intersecting relationships and shifting allegiances. I could acknowledge Kevin's outreach without being drawn back into Morgan Tech's orbit. The following week brought an unexpected development. A major industry publication requested an interview about Chen Security Solutions' innovative approach to financial data protection, specifically highlighting the work we'd done for Westlake Financial, Rachel Wilson's employer and Morgan Tech's direct competitor. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very expertise the Morgans had attempted to minimize was now being recognized in a professional context they couldn't control. I agreed to the interview with one condition: that it focus on the technical aspects of our security solutions rather than any personal narrative about my previous connections. "You're missing a marketing opportunity," Mia argued when I explained my approach. "The woman leaves controlling tech dynasty to build her own security empire" angle would generate massive interest. "That's exactly what I don't want," I explained. Success built on Morgan association, even negative association, is still defining myself in relation to them. I want Chen Security Solutions recognized for our work, not my personal history. Mia considered this, then nodded. Fair point. Though, just so you know, your refusal to dish on the Morgans only makes people more curious. Let them be curious, I replied. Mystery is a better marketing strategy than expose. The interview was published the following month, focusing exclusively on our technical innovations and industry perspective. The only reference to my past was a single line acknowledging my previous security consulting work with various Fortune 500 companies before founding Chen Security Solutions. Within days of publication, our inquiry volume doubled. Clients sought our services based on demonstrated expertise rather than personal drama. Exactly the foundation I wanted for the company's growth. 4 months later, I was finalizing preparations for a presentation at an international cybersecurity conference in Vancouver when my office phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Chen Security Solutions, this is Olivia, I answered, distracted by the slide deck I was reviewing. Olivia? It's Rachel Wilson. I froze, instantly alert. After my rejection of her coffee invitation 6 months earlier, I hadn't expected direct contact. Ms. Wilson, I acknowledged neutrally. How can I help you? A pause, then. This isn't an easy call to make. I'm reaching out in a professional capacity, despite our complicated personal connection. I appreciate your directness, I replied, curious despite my caution. What's the professional matter? Westlake Technologies has experienced a security breach, she explained, her tone shifting to purely business. Our standard protocols have failed to identify the vulnerability. Your firm's reputation for handling these situations discreetly is why I'm calling. The irony was almost too perfect. Daniel's fiancé seeking my professional help. I considered declining immediately, but my security specialist's curiosity was piqued. What type of breach are you experiencing? I asked, maintaining professional distance. She described a sophisticated attack pattern that targeted proprietary research data, exactly the type of complex security challenge that most interested me professionally. Under other circumstances, it would be an ideal project for Chen Security Solutions. Why approach me specifically? I asked the necessary question. There are other qualified firms without our complicated history. Another pause. Because you're the best, she admitted. And because I believe you're professional enough to separate personal history from professional responsibility. I'd expected many tactics from the Morgan universe: manipulation, triangulation, guilt, but not this direct appeal to professional pride. I need to consider this carefully, I replied. Our engagement would require certain parameters to maintain appropriate boundaries. Of course, she agreed quickly. Whatever terms you need. I'll have my team prepare a preliminary proposal with our conditions, I said. You'll have it by tomorrow. After ending the call, I sat in thoughtful silence. Taking on Westlake as a client would inevitably create points of contact with the Morgan world I'd worked to distance myself from. Yet refusing a significant project solely because of personal history seemed contrary to the professional identity I'd reclaimed. I called Mia into my office and explained the situation. It's a trap, she declared immediately. They're trying to pull you back into their orbit. Maybe, I acknowledged. Or maybe it's exactly what Rachel claims, a company with a security emergency seeking the best available help. And if Daniel gets involved, Mia challenged, then our contract will specify that all communication goes through Rachel or their technical team only, I replied. No contact with Morgan-affiliated individuals. After careful consideration, I decided to accept the project with strict parameters. Limited engagement period, specific points of contact, clear boundaries regarding information sharing, and premium pricing that reflected the complexity of both the technical challenge and the interpersonal dynamics. Rachel accepted our terms without negotiation, which told me the security situation was likely even more serious than she'd indicated. I assigned our strongest team to the project, maintaining oversight but delegating direct communication to my senior engineer. a buffer that preserved professional boundaries. The breach was sophisticated, but not insurmountable. Within 3 weeks, we'd identified the vulnerability, contained the damage, and implemented enhanced security protocols. Our final report included detailed recommendations for systemic improvements beyond the immediate issue. Rachel requested a closing meeting with me personally, something our contract permitted for project conclusion. I agreed to coffee at a neutral location, curious about this woman who had played such a significant role in my life while remaining essentially a stranger. She was waiting when I arrived at the downtown cafe, elegant in a way that reminded me of Patricia's aesthetic preferences: tasteful, expensive, restrained. She rose as I approached, her expression professionally pleasant. "Thank you for meeting me," she began as we settled at a corner table. "And for taking on our project, despite the circumstances." "The work itself was interesting," I replied honestly. "My team enjoyed the challenge." She nodded, then seemed to make a decision. "I should acknowledge the elephant in the room. I know about Lake Tahoe, what was planned, and how you countered it." This surprised me. I'd assumed the Morgans would have crafted a sanitized version even for Rachel. "Daniel told you?" I asked. "Eventually," she confirmed. "After we became engaged, I insisted on understanding what had happened." The Morgan version seemed suspiciously tidy. I couldn't help but smile at her accurate assessment. "And having heard both versions?" She met my gaze directly. "I would have done exactly what you did, perhaps with less restraint." It was the last response I'd expected, candid acknowledgement rather than justification or platitudes. "The Morgans underestimated you," she continued. "A pattern I've noticed they repeat with intelligent women who don't conform to their expectations." "Including you?" I asked, genuinely curious about her relationship with the family that had once championed her as Daniel's perfect match. "Let's just say I understand why you insisted on clear boundaries in our contract," she replied with a hint of irony. "Patricia's vision of the ideal Morgan wife doesn't allow for a woman with an executive title and independent career ambitions." I absorbed this revelation with interest. Perhaps Rachel's return to Daniel's life wasn't the perfect Morgan narrative resolution it had appeared to be. Perhaps she, too, was navigating her own version of resistance to Morgan assimilation. "Why tell me this?" I asked directly. "Professional respect," she replied. "You provided exceptional service despite personal complications. And perhaps," she hesitated, "a recognition that while our situations differ dramatically, we might understand certain challenges in common." We finished our coffee with a surprisingly candid discussion of women in tech leadership, carefully avoiding more personal topics. As we prepared to leave, Rachel handed me a business card, not her corporate contact, but a personal one. "If you're ever interested in discussing industry trends without corporate oversight," she offered, "I'd welcome the conversation." I accepted the card without commitment. The encounter left me with much to consider about assumptions, narratives, and the complex ways lives intersect beyond the stories we construct about them. 9 months after Lake Tahoe, I hosted a housewarming gathering at my loft to celebrate both my fully renovated space and Chen Security Solutions expansion into new offices. The guest list reflected my reclaimed priorities: Mia and her husband, several colleagues who had become friends, my parents who had driven up from Portland, Sophia with her new boyfriend, a graphic designer with no connection to Seattle High society, and a few new connections I'd made through professional channels. As we mingled in the open-plan living area, I observed the easy flow of conversation, the genuine laughter, the absence of the hypervigilance that had characterized Morgan's social gatherings. No one here was calculating strategic advantage or managing impressions. No one was assessing clothing brands or jewelry provenance. People simply connected as authentic versions of themselves. My father approached, handing me a fresh glass of wine. "You've created something beautiful here," he said, gesturing to both the space and the gathering within it. A life that reflects who you truly are. It took longer than it should have, I admitted. I lost sight of myself for a while. But never completely, he countered. The core of who you are remained strong enough to eventually break through. His words resonated with truth. Even at my most Morgan-influenced, I had maintained an essential kernel of self-recognition, the part that had collected evidence, planned contingencies, and ultimately reclaimed my narrative. Later, as my guests began to depart, Mia pulled me aside with unexpected news. I probably shouldn't tell you this, but you deserve to know. Morgan Tech's security division is being restructured after a significant data breach last week. My professional interest immediately engaged. What kind of breach? The kind that exposes precisely the vulnerabilities you identified in your assessment 3 years ago, she said with raised eyebrows. The ones they dismissed as overly cautious. I absorbed this information with mixed emotions, professional validation, but also concern for the customers whose data had potentially been compromised. How did you hear about it? Kevin Zhao reached out to me, she admitted. He's looking for a new position and wondered if we might be hiring. I laughed at the irony. The security director who replaced me wants to work for me? Life has a way of coming full circle, Mia observed. What should I tell him? I considered the question from multiple angles: professional, ethical, personal. Tell him we'll review his qualifications like any other applicant. Past affiliations won't automatically disqualify him, but they won't provide special consideration either. 2 days later, a hand-delivered envelope arrived at my office. Inside was a formal invitation to speak at the Women in Technology Summit, a prestigious annual conference. The personal note attached came from an unexpected source, Patricia Morgan, listed as this year's honorary chairperson. Olivia, the note read in Patricia's distinctive handwriting, your expertise would be valuable to our attendees. Professional considerations aside, I hope we might find an opportunity for a private conversation during the event. There are matters I wish to address personally. I studied the invitation with mixture of surprise and skepticism. Patricia's involvement suggested complexity beyond a simple professional opportunity. Was this an attempt at reconciliation? A public relations move to demonstrate there were no hard feelings? Or something else entirely? After careful consideration, I accepted the speaking engagement but declined the private meeting, responding with professional courtesy that made clear my boundaries remained firm. I would share my expertise with the industry gathering, but I had no interest in reopening personal channels with the Morgan family. The summit was held at Seattle's Convention Center, a 3-day gathering of technology leaders from across the country. My presentation on ethical hacking and vulnerability assessment was scheduled for the second day, allowing me to observe the dynamics of the event before taking the stage. Patricia's presence was subtle but unmistakable. She had clearly influenced everything from the floral arrangements to the catering choices. I spotted her across the main hall during the opening reception, elegant as always in designer attire, holding court among admirers who seemed unaware of the calculation behind her gracious smiles. Our paths didn't cross directly until moments before my presentation, when she approached as I reviewed my notes in the speaker's area. "Olivia?" she greeted me, her voice carrying the same measured control I remembered. "Your session has the highest registration of any at the summit. Quite an accomplishment." "Thank you," I replied neutrally. "The topic resonates with security concerns across industries." She nodded, studying me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. "You look well. Success clearly agrees with you." Before I could respond, the event coordinator arrived to escort me to the stage, providing a natural end to the brief interaction. My presentation was well received, the audience engaged and responsive. I didn't dwell on Patricia's presence in the back of the room, focusing instead on delivering valuable content to the professionals who had come to learn. Afterward, during the Q&A session, a familiar voice rose from the audience. Patricia Morgan, microphone in hand, addressed me directly. Ms. Chen, given your expertise in identifying system vulnerabilities, what advice would you offer organizations about recognizing when their internal culture itself might constitute a security risk? The question was layered with subtext, personal, implications beneath the professional framing. The audience, unaware of our history, waited for my response with simple curiosity. I considered my words carefully, recognizing the opportunity to address broader truth without descending into personal grievance. That's an excellent question, I replied, meeting Patricia's gaze directly. Organizations often focus on technical vulnerabilities while overlooking cultural ones. When information is compartmentalized, when questioning is discouraged, when appearance is valued over substance, these create perfect conditions for security failures. The most dangerous vulnerability in any system is the belief that it's impenetrable. A murmur of agreement rippled through the audience. Patricia maintained eye contact, a slight nod acknowledging the layers in my response. For perhaps the first time, we communicated with complete honesty, the professional framing allowing truths that had never been possible in our personal interactions. After the session concluded, I was surrounded by attendees with follow-up questions and business cards. By the time I extricated myself, Patricia had departed. I felt a curious sense of completion, not reconciliation, but acknowledgement. Whatever. Her motivation for creating that moment of public interaction, it had provided an unexpected form of closure. That evening in my hotel room, I received a text from Daniel. Your presentation was compelling. Patricia actually took notes. A first, in my experience. I hadn't known he was at the conference, though I shouldn't have been surprised given his mother's involvement. I debated whether to respond, ultimately deciding that brief acknowledgement maintained appropriate boundaries. The topic is relevant to Morgan Tech's current challenges, I replied. I hope the content proves useful. His response came quickly. More relevant than you know. The board is questioning decisions made during my father's leadership. Changes coming. I didn't pursue further details. Whatever transformations were occurring within Morgan Tech belonged to a chapter of my life that was complete. I wished them neither success nor failure. They simply existed in a parallel narrative that no longer significantly intersected with mine. The next morning, as I checked out of the hotel, I encountered Patricia in the lobby. She appeared to be waiting, her positioning too deliberate for coincidence. I hoped we might speak briefly, she said, approaching with the same measured grace that had once been my aspiration to emulate. Perhaps coffee? I hesitated, weighing the value of such a conversation against my commitment to maintaining distance. Curiosity won out. Briefly, I agreed, following her to a quiet corner of the hotel restaurant. Once seated, Patricia surprised me by coming directly to the point. I owe you an apology, Olivia. Not a qualified one, not an explanation. A simple acknowledgement that my treatment of you was inexcusable. I maintained a neutral expression, though inwardly I was genuinely startled by this unprecedented directness. What prompted this realization? I asked, genuinely curious about the catalyst for such an uncharacteristic admission. She considered her response, hands clasped precisely around her untouched coffee cup. Several factors. The consequences of Lake Tahoe, certainly, Sophia's departure, but primarily, watching the success you've achieved once freed from our constraints. Success I might have achieved within the Morgan orbit, had there been genuine acceptance, I observed. Perhaps, she acknowledged, though I doubt I would have permitted it then. I was. She paused, seeming to search for honest self-assessment, threatened by your capabilities, your independence, your unwillingness to be shaped. Those were precisely the qualities Daniel valued when we met, I noted. Yes, she agreed, surprising me again. Before I convinced him they needed to be tempered. A manipulation I now recognize caused significant harm to both of you. I studied her, trying to reconcile this self-aware woman with the Patricia who had orchestrated my exclusion. Why tell me this now? Because Morgan Tech is changing, she replied. Robert is stepping down. The board has concerns about management decisions, security protocols, corporate culture. Daniel will take over, but under conditions that limit the family's unilateral control. I absorbed this information without the satisfaction I might once have expected to feel. The Morgan Empire's internal reckonings seemed distant now, corporate. Adjustments that no longer affected my daily reality. I wish you well with the transition, I said sincerely. But I'm still unclear about your purpose in sharing this with me. I'm not asking for forgiveness or reconciliation, Patricia clarified, merely offering acknowledgement of harm done and information that might provide context for any industry rumors you encounter. I appreciated her clarity. This wasn't a manipulative attempt to draw me back into the Morgan orbit, but a business-like exchange of recognition and information, perhaps the most honest interaction we'd ever had. Thank you for the direct communication, I said as I prepared to leave. I hope the changes bring positive outcomes for the company and its customers. Patricia nodded, remaining seated as I stood. One last thing, Olivia. You were right, that night in Tahoe. You were never the problem. The Morgan system is, and part of me always knew it. I acknowledged her words with a nod, then walked away, carrying not bitterness but a curious sense of completion. The Patricia Morgan who had loomed so large in my married life suddenly seemed smaller, more human. A woman whose carefully constructed world was shifting beneath her, much as mine once had. Outside the hotel, Seattle's spring sunshine broke, through morning clouds, casting the city in clear, bright light. I had planned to go directly to the office, but impulsively decided to take a few hours for myself. I texted Mia that I would be in after lunch, then headed toward the waterfront. As I walked along Elliott Bay, breathing salt air and watching ferries cross to distant islands, I reflected on how completely my life had transformed in the year since Lake Tahoe. The professional success was gratifying, but the internal reclamation, even more so. The ability to move through the world without constantly monitoring my words, actions, and appearance against an external standard of acceptability. My phone buzzed with an email notification. A potential new client, a government agency seeking security protocol development. I forwarded it to Mia for preliminary assessment, then continued my walk, allowing myself the luxury of unscheduled time, another freedom the Morgan life had rarely permitted. Near Pike Place Market, I spotted a small gallery featuring contemporary Chinese-American artists. Inside, vibrant paintings and sculptures created conversations between traditional techniques and modern themes. Cultural integration without erasure, precisely the balance I had never been permitted to express in the Morgan household. Beautiful. Work, isn't it? Came a voice beside me as I studied a particularly striking piece. I turned to find a man about my age, with intelligent eyes and an easy manner that suggested comfort in his own skin. Not conventionally handsome in the Morgan-approved way, but attractive in his authenticity. Very, I agreed. I appreciate art that honors tradition while embracing innovation. Michael Liu, he introduced himself, the gallery owner. Olivia Chen, I replied, accepting his offered hand. I was just passing by, but your window display drew me in. My goal exactly, he smiled. Are you interested in contemporary Chinese-American art, or was it just the colors that caught your eye? Both, I admitted. I'm Chinese-American. Myself, though my connection to the artistic traditions has been complicated. Cultural identity often is, he nodded. That's what much of this work explores: the navigation of multiple worlds without losing yourself in the process. We fell into easy conversation about the exhibition, then broader topics of cultural integration and personal authenticity. I learned he had left a corporate career to open the gallery, prioritizing passion over security in a way that resonated with my own recent choices. "Would you be interested in coming to our opening reception next Friday?" he asked as I prepared to leave. "We're featuring a new artist who explores cybersecurity themes through traditional brush painting techniques. Given your name badge from the tech conference, it might interest you professionally as well as personally." I accepted the invitation with genuine interest, exchanging contact information free from the calculation that had characterized my social interactions during my marriage. Just two professionals with shared interests. No agenda beyond potential connection. Walking back to my office afterward, I reflected on the spontaneous encounter. How different from the carefully vetted and approved interactions of my Morgan life. The gallery opening might lead to professional collaboration, personal friendship, or simply an interesting evening of art appreciation. The outcome remained open, undefined by external expectations or requirements. 1 year to the day after Lake Tahoe, I stood at the podium of a major cybersecurity conference in San Francisco, delivering the keynote address on ethical hacking and vulnerability assessment. The audience of industry leaders and emerging specialists listened attentively as I shared insights gleaned from a career built on finding weaknesses in seemingly impenetrable systems. What I didn't share explicitly, but what informed every aspect of my presentation, was how this professional expertise had ultimately saved me personally. How the skills of identifying vulnerabilities, documenting evidence, and implementing countermeasures had enabled me to break free from a system designed to consume my identity. After the presentation, during the reception, a young woman approached me, Chinese American like myself, early in her career, but with the sharp intelligence I recognized in promising security specialists. "Ms. Chen," she began hesitantly, "your presentation was incredible. But what inspired me most was learning about your journey, how you rebuilt your company after leaving a prestigious connection behind." I was surprised by her knowledge of my personal history, though I shouldn't have been. The tech world ran on information, both professional and personal. "Sometimes the most secure path isn't the most obvious one," I replied, curious about what had drawn her to my story. "I'm facing a similar choice," she admitted. "I've been offered a position at a major firm, but they want me to focus on client relations rather than technical work because I present well. My family thinks I should take it for the prestige." I recognized the dilemma immediately: the seductive pull of external validation versus the authentic calling of her talents. "What does your expertise tell you?" I asked. "If you were assessing this situation as a security risk, what vulnerabilities would you identify?" She considered this framing, her expression clearing as she applied professional analysis to her personal decision. "Critical vulnerability, potential compromise of core functions for superficial benefit, high risk of system integrity failure over time." I smiled, appreciating her quick grasp of the metaphor. "Then you already know what you need to do. Trust your assessment." As she thanked me and moved away, I realized that perhaps the most meaningful outcome of my Morgan experience was not just my own reclamation, but the possibility that my journey might help others recognize and avoid similar traps before they closed. Later that evening, as I gazed out at the San Francisco skyline from my hotel room, my phone chimed with a text from Michael Liu. Over the months since our chance meeting at his gallery, our professional collaboration had evolved into friendship, and gradually into a relationship characterized by mutual respect and genuine appreciation. A stark contrast to the performance of connection that had defined my marriage. "Congratulations on the keynote," he wrote. "Wish I could have been there to see it. Dinner when you're back to celebrate?" I smiled, typing an affirmative response. Unlike my relationship with Daniel, which had required constant editing of Myself to maintain Morgan approval, Michael appreciated precisely the qualities the Morgans had tried to suppress. My professional focus, my cultural identity, my unfiltered perspectives. Our relationship progressed on its own authentic timeline, neither rushed by external expectations nor constrained by family approval requirements. Whether it would lead to long-term commitment remained an open question we both approached with honest communication rather than strategic calculation. This openness to undefined outcomes represented perhaps the most significant transformation in my post-Morgan life. The willingness to allow authenticity to guide my path rather than predetermined narratives of success or acceptability. As I prepared for bed, a notification appeared on my phone. A business news alert about Morgan Tech announcing a major corporate restructuring. The accompanying photo showed Daniel at a press conference, looking strained but determined as he discussed the company's new direction focusing on consumer privacy and ethical data management. I felt a moment of strange dislocation, seeing this public version of a man I had once known intimately, now occupying a parallel life completely separate from mine. I wished him well in his efforts to transform the company, then set aside my phone without reading the full article. Whatever challenges or successes awaited Daniel and the Morgan Empire belonged to a different story now, one that had shaped but no longer defined my own narrative. The next morning, I delivered a workshop for emerging cybersecurity professionals, many just beginning their careers. As I guided them through practical exercises and vulnerability assessment, I was struck by the eager participation of several young women in the predominantly male group. During the networking lunch that followed, one of these women approached me. "Ms. Chen, I just wanted to say how meaningful it is to see someone like you leading in this field. My professors kept suggesting I focus on people skills rather than technical specialization, but watching your career path has shown me I don't have to choose." Her words touched something deep. The recognition that my visibility in the field might create space for others to pursue their authentic talents without the compromises I had temporarily accepted. "Trust your technical instincts," I advised her. "The industry needs your perspective precisely because it's underrepresented. And remember that people skills aren't separate from technical excellence. They're part of comprehensive security thinking." Back in Seattle the following week, I received an unexpected request from the University of Washington's Computer Science Department. They were developing a new course on ethical hacking and corporate security culture and wanted me to consider a guest lecturer position. The opportunity to shape new professionals' understanding of both technical and cultural vulnerability assessment appealed deeply. As I reviewed the proposed syllabus, a section titled Case Studies in Security Culture Failures caught my attention. Among the proposed examples was a thinly veiled reference to Morgan Tech's recent data breach, not mentioned by name for legal reasons, but recognizable to anyone familiar with the industry. I smiled at the irony. The Morgan family's carefully constructed image of perfection had ultimately become an educational example of how prioritizing appearance over substance creates security vulnerabilities. Rather than removing this section, I added suggestions for examining how hierarchical cultures resistant to internal criticism often develop systemic blind spots. 2 years after Lake Tahoe, I stood in the rooftop garden of my Capitol Hill loft, hosting a small gathering to celebrate Chen's Security Solutions' second anniversary as an independent firm. The company had grown beyond my initial projections, now employing 15 specialists and maintaining offices in Seattle and Portland. Among the guests mingling in the evening sunshine were my parents, Mia and her husband, Sophia and her now fiancé Alex, several key team members, and Michael, who had become an increasingly important presence in my life. The conversation flowed easily between professional achievements and personal connections, technology trends and art exhibitions, an integration of aspects of my identity that had never been possible in the Morgan world. My father approached, glass of wine in hand. "I spoke with your mother earlier about visiting Shanghai next spring," he said. "Would you be interested in joining us? It's been too long since you connected with that part of your heritage." Felt a surge of emotion at the invitation. During my marriage, international travel had been exclusively planned around Morgan business interests and social connections. The idea of a journey focused on cultural reconnection, family bonds, and personal enrichment represented another reclamation of priorities the Morgans had systematically devalued. "I'd love that," I replied sincerely. "The Portland office should be fully established by then, which would make the timing perfect." As the evening progressed, I found myself in conversation with Sophia, who had successfully launched her interior design firm and recently accepted a major commercial project that would significantly expand her professional reputation. "I saw Patricia last week," she mentioned casually. "At a charity function I couldn't avoid. She asked about you." "What did she want to know?" I asked, curious but not concerned. "Just if we were still in touch, how your business was doing." Sophia shrugged. I kept it vague and professional, but she seemed genuinely interested, not just gathering intelligence. "The Morgans are adapting to a changing reality," I observed. "Their traditional methods of influence are becoming less effective in both business and social spheres." "True," Sophia agreed. "Though I've noticed something else recently. Small changes in how they operate. James mentioned that Daniel has implemented new management practices at Morgan Tech, more collaborative decision-making, less hierarchical control. And Patricia's charity foundation has started funding programs for women in technology, including scholarships specifically for minority students." I absorbed this information with interest but without investment in the outcome. Whether the Morgans were genuinely evolving or simply adapting their strategies for continued influence wasn't my concern. My investment in their narrative had ended when I walked away from that restaurant in Lake Tahoe. "Growth is possible for anyone," I said diplomatically. "I wish them well with it." As sunset painted the sky in brilliant orange and gold, I found myself standing slightly apart from my guests, taking in the scene with a profound sense of contentment. My life had assumed a shape entirely of my own design. A successful business built on genuine expertise, relationships based on mutual respect rather than strategic advantage, a living space that reflected my authentic aesthetic rather than socially approved displays of status. Michael joined me, following my gaze across the gathering. "Happy?" he asked simply. "Completely," I replied, realizing the truth of it. The peace I felt wasn't dependent on external validation or achievement, but on the fundamental alignment between my outer circumstances and inner values, a congruence I had sacrificed during my years with the Morgans. "I have something for you," he said, handing me a small, flat package wrapped in simple paper. An anniversary gift of sorts. Inside was a framed Chinese proverb, beautifully rendered in traditional calligraphy. "The caged bird thinks flying is an illness." "It reminded me of your journey," Michael explained. "How what others perceived as instability, your resistance to confinement, was actually your natural state trying to reassert itself." I was touched by his insight and the perfect metaphor for my experience. "It's beautiful," I said, genuinely moved, and absolutely accurate. Later, after our guests had departed, I stood alone in my rooftop garden, watching distant lightning illuminate the horizon over the Cascade Mountains. The approaching storm seemed a fitting metaphor for the journey I had navigated, weathering darkness to emerge into clearer air, transformed but intact. My phone chimed with a final message for the evening, a text from the young woman I'd counseled at the San Francisco conference. Turned down the client relations position, started my own security consultancy instead. Already have 2 clients. Thank you for showing me it was possible. I smiled, tucking the phone away and lifting my face to feel the first cool raindrops. The exclusion from those family photos had been the final push I needed to reveal my true identity. Not just to the Morgans, but to myself. In losing what I thought I wanted, I had found what I actually needed, not acceptance from people determined to reject me, but the courage to live authentically as myself. From the pool house at Lake Tahoe to the rooftop garden in Seattle, my journey hadn't been about revenge, but reclamation. The Morgans had tried to make me smaller, to reduce me to an accessory in their carefully curated image. Instead, they had inadvertently set me free. As rain began to fall more steadily, I remained in my garden a moment longer, water soaking my hair and clothes. No Patricia-approved awning sheltered me from this natural element. No Morgan sensibility suggested I retreat from the impropriety of getting wet. In the distance, thunder rumbled. Nature's applause for a story concluded on my terms. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.